killed Gary, they killed Gary.
I still can see it when I close my eyes.
This windshield pops off the car and goes how many feet?
400 feet. I'm the killer. I got my gym bag, which fits in the country club scenario. Open the door, put it down, close the door. I walk away.
It is one of the most notorious murders in Tucson history.
He was a wonderful father. He was a true gentleman and a true kind person.
They rubbed shoulders with people in high society.
Everybody thought car bombing has to be a mob hit. Very spectacular. We're sending a message.
Turns out, according to some, who didn't want him dead? A long list of persons of interest, an ex-girlfriend, an ex-wife, ex-business associates.
It was pure obsession. His hatred was pure obsession.
And we're going to reenact the bombing.
Everybody's under.
To see how it could have been done.
2, 1.
Now we're starting to pick up some heavy components.
That you can take what seems like a scene of classic chaos and create any kind of order out of it is remarkable to us. So what specifically did you find as you looked at all that evidence?
And it was titled To Kill. And right at the top of the list was Gary Triano.
Welcome to Tucson, Arizona, or even on a sweet golf course like this one. The triple-digit temperatures and the blue skies above can transform in an instant.
La Paloma Country Club is nestled in the Tucson foothills. It's absolutely beautiful.
You can see the city, you can see the mountains. It's Jack Nicklaus Golf Course.
Typical Friday, very busy golf day. Wednesdays and Fridays were gambler days. And so about 5:15, 5:20, I was standing at the bar, and all of a sudden there was this thunderous boom.
I heard this huge bang, and I rushed over there, tried to see if there's something I could do.
Okay, what's going on there? Okay, there's some kind of an explosion in the country club parking lot. I'm not sure. We have one of the victims has no pulse. They've begun CPR. I guess it's a massive fire. It was some kind of an explosion.
The building shook. I'd never felt anything like that. I immediately turned. I went out to the parking lot, and there was a car on fire, split open like a sardine can.
I found a man still sitting in his seat, no pulse, pale, blood's gone out of him, just white.
Dr. Sam Buttman had come up alongside the car towards me. He looked at me and he said, "Damn, he's dead."
Ken Halligan knew who the dead man behind the wheel of the destroyed car was. He was a longtime member of the country club named Gary Triano.
And there's a member, and he was playing with Gary, and he was sitting on the floor next to his locker, and he was just sobbing, "They killed Gary, they killed Gary."
But the question was, who killed Gary? And why would they do it in such a spectacular way? The blast had stopped Gary's gold Movado watch at 5:38 p.m. End of the line for a wheeler dealer who was unafraid to gamble on the golf course, or for that matter in the business world. And according to his lawyer, Ron Lehman, a man always ready to bet big on himself.
Gary was a tall person who would command a room when he walked in. Dark hair, always had a nice suntan, always had a smile. He was larger than life.
Starting in the 1980s, this former car salesman, he'd sought to take advantage of the population boom in Tucson by getting into real estate and land development and gaming on a Native American reservation.
One of Gary's most successful projects was Indian gaming. You're talking about a high-volume slot machine operation. Gary's personal take was $1 million a month.
Gary Triano was not shy about spending that mega money on the finer things in life. You know, limos, Learjets, even a yacht.
He loved spending $25,000 a week on wine while he was cruising around the Adriatic Sea with his financing partners.
Let's have a look at some of these. This one you were just telling us is very special to your heart.
Well, this picture is because it was on my birthday, 16 days before he died. He was very kind and gracious and generous.
That, too, was Gary Triano, a valued role model and mentor for his niece, Melissa Triano. As her uncle, and later her employer, he was a figure of warmth and encouragement for her after a childhood full of hardships. What was it like for you, after all the experiences you've gone through, to really get to know this man and to come to respect the way he went through life?
It changed my life. He was the only person that really believed in me and made me feel like I could, be successful with anything.
He'd had 2 children with his wife, Mary. Gary was a devoted father of his son and daughter, and the couple had become a fixture of Tucson society. That changed after Gary crossed paths with a top-earning real estate go-getter. Her name was Pamela Phillips.
Pamela Phillips was very elegant. She played the part of a socialite. She always looked very put together.
Gary told me that, he met the love of his life, and he was really taken aback by this beautiful, intelligent woman.
And Gary, who is so smitten, the story goes that he calls his wife up, who's on vacation in Europe with their 2 children, and he just announces, I'm leaving you.
Pam was a figure of widespread fascination and could be every bit a life-altering sensation. As much of a merger as a marriage, Gary and Pam were officially power-coupled at a black-tie wedding on a yacht in San Diego. Did you hear that the vows they exchanged included the phrase, for richer or for richer, instead of for richer or poorer?
I think I remember that now that you say that, yeah.
You did hear that?
Yeah.
Gary bought Pam a beautiful diamond ring, which he claimed was worth $250,000. They had twin Jaguars. They had this beautiful home at the base of the Catalina Mountains.
Pam and Gary would have 2 kids of their own, while rubbing shoulders with some powerful peers.
Pam and Gary knew Donald Trump, Marla Maples. Donald and Marla came to a University of Arizona basketball game with Gary and Pam.
He invited Donald Trump out to be his partner at the member guest. And of course, he had to make sure that everybody in the club knew a month before.
So, on that fateful day of November 1st, 1996, Gary Triano was approaching his 53rd birthday with a note of optimism, unaware of the big surprise that awaited him as he stepped off the 18th green. In fact, this invite had gone out to all of Gary's friends, inviting them to a surprise birthday party that was to begin in just a few hours.
Around 4:30, Gary was in the bar with a couple of his buddies at a table. One of the members actually walked up to him and actually said, "Happy birthday." I had no idea it was his birthday.
Gary is walking towards his Lincoln Town car, and he's sliding into the seat, and he sees a blue canvas bag on the passenger seat.
An early birthday gift left in his unlocked car by a friend, perhaps? Gary leans over to unzip the bag and...
The impact of the explosion was incredible. The front windshield flew like 200 feet into the air and landed in the swimming pool.
I'm at home, it's after hours, and I get a call from my sergeant, and basically he says there's been a car explosion at the La Paloma Country Club.
Detective James Gamber was a newly minted detective with the Tucson Sheriff's Department, and he was brand new to homicide. This was his 2nd case.
When he arrived on scene, you could see the victim vehicle. It blew the car doors open, tore the roof off the car. Gary's body is still in the driver's seat.
When Melissa Triano heard there had been some sort of incident with Gary, she immediately rushes over to the country club. So what do you remember feeling as you were running towards the car?
Just panic, just shock. I didn't think it was real. The whole top of the car was gone. I still can see it when I close my eyes.
Immediately, cops were asking who could have wanted to kill Gary in such a spectacular fashion. They would quickly learn a lot of people.
Was it to send the message?
So in the movie Casino, Robert De Niro's character, closely based on the real-life mobster Frank Lefty Rosenthal, climbs into his 1983 Eldorado, turns on the ignition, and is engulfed in a fireball.
A bombing sort of has mafia written all over it. Who would want to detonate a bomb at a posh country club in broad daylight with, over 100 witnesses watching?
Arizona has a past with the mob. In the mid-70s, newspaper reporter Don Bowles, he was investigating organized crime, getting national attention, covered by Walter Cronkite.
Don Bowles is a 47-year-old investigative reporter for the Arizona Republic. He's been working on a series about the mafia.
And when Bowles returned to his car, a remote-controlled bomb exploded under the driver's seat.
Bowles uttered the word mafia as he lay dying, but police were never able to pin his death on organized crime. Strictly speaking, what killed Gary Triano was not a car bomb. It was a pipe bomb on the passenger seat, detonated by remote control. And as Detective James Gamber began looking into Gary's murder, the mob was top of mind.
Everybody thought car bombing has to be a mob hit. Very spectacular. We're sending a message. Don't ever mess with us.
Somebody sent a message, and you don't know if they're coming for you next or if it's the whole family. I didn't know if he was involved with something that might want to hurt us all. You were on guard all the time.
But why would the mob, or anyone else, have it in for Gary Triano? Well, maybe because by the time he was leaving that country club on the first day of November 1996, he was no longer the high-flying millionaire everyone thought he was. In fact, Gary was flat broke.
He owed $4.5 million to 4 casinos in Las Vegas that were supposedly had mob ties.
Gary had owned chunks of undeveloped real estate. He'd invested in a radio station, even financed this misbegotten movie, The Mafu Cage, starring Lee Grant, Carol Kane, Will Geer, and an orangutan.
Isn't he too big for her to handle? No, he's not.
Normally, yes, perhaps, but he's very gentle.
Did you ever see your uncle's movie?
Oh my gosh, yes. In fact, I had a horse once, and I named it Mafu. And we joke about it still because that movie was just horrible. It was horrible.
But it wasn't movies like that, or real estate, that was making Gary rich. It was Native American gambling. He was making millions until he wasn't.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs threw him out of the administration of that contract. Gary personally lost $1 million approximately in monthly income.
So suddenly now he's at a zero income, but his expenses and his lifestyle, continued.
These things were happening during the real estate recession, so things hit the fan at once.
Investigators set their sights on Gary Triano's financial dealings because he owed large sums of money to a lot of people.
There were any number of suspects that the Sheriff's Department was looking at. There were Chinese investors, there were Mexican investors, there were mafia investors, all of whom Gary purportedly owed money to.
It was a house of cards that was crumbling fast. He was promising investors, collateral on property that he didn't own. He was promising Mexican investors money that he didn't have.
He had that gambler mentality, so he was quite a challenge to manage as a member. I constantly chased him financially. He was very good at tipping, but not very good at paying his bills.
And at one point, Pam got a phone call and picked up the phone and heard on the other line a threat from one of the investors saying, we don't get paid, we're going to kill you. Gary became extremely paranoid, and he starts to sleep with a loaded gun in his bed.
By the 90s, Gary was on the hook for $27 million. He'd run out of time, he'd run out of ideas, and declared bankruptcy.
When Gary ran out of money, his marriage started to disintegrate.
Pam had sort of had enough. She had married this man who was worth millions, and now he wasn't.
So Pam's done, and she files for divorce, and she flees, and she heads off to Aspen with her children.
A bitter divorce and financial ruin left Gary scrambling to stay afloat.
Things were so bad in Gary's life that he went from living in the nicest houses wherever he was around the world to sleeping on a friend's couch.
One of Gary Triano's friends from high school met with Gary Triano the day before he died. Gary was trying to get him and his father to give him a $50,000 loan. His friend described him as anxious and desperate. That loan never happened, and tomorrow never came.
That summit to plummet journey meant it wasn't even his Lincoln Town car that Gary had driven to La Paloma that day. He'd borrowed it from a friend to keep up appearances. And before Gary was even buried, Detective Gamber already had a long list of persons of interest.
We monitor the funeral, as morbid as that may sound. Who shows up, who didn't show up, who wasn't appropriate, who was appropriate. It was a good way to see who should we go talk to.
And Gamber noticed one particularly interesting absence.
Pamela Phillips wasn't at the funeral. She was conspicuously absent. But based on the acrimony and the separation, that didn't really surprise us.
But associates of an eccentric billionaire say he had reasons of his own to want Gary Triano very dead.
He had the capacity and the resources and the henchmen, if you will, to construct the kind of bomb that blew up Gary Triano.
And this doctor claims he saw a kill list written in that man's daily plan.
And it was titled "To Kill," and it was numbered. And right at the top of the list was Gary Triano.
At the Pima County Sheriff's Office, way in the back corner of the impound lot, after 28 years, is Gary Triano's last ride, that 1989 Lincoln Town car. Detective James Gamber showing up close just how devastating that pipe bomb was on that huge mass of Detroit metal.
And this is Gary Triano. This is the car he was driving.
And I know that there's been a lot that's been picked over this, and it's changed over the many years since this crime happened, but you can still see the incredible destruction that took place. This roof is supposed to be flat, essentially, isn't it?
Essentially, right. It should lay right along this line. And you can, if you get a look down here at the frame, you can see where the floorboards have been blown off of the side body panels.
Wow. Just
by the force of that blast downwards.
And the whole arc of this is the result of that bomb also.
Right. Yeah. This, you know, if you looked at this, almost looks like the path of travel of a bullet. Well,
yeah.
Technically it was. It's a projectile, shrapnel.
So everybody knew it was Gary's car. The one thing Gary never did was lock his car.
Lock his car, lock his doors. So I'm the killer.
Right.
I walk up here. I got my duffel bag, my gym bag, which fits in the country club scenario.
Right.
Open the door, put it down, close the door. I walk away.
So finding that killer became Detective Gamber's main goal. There was a monumental list of individuals to go through. But only a few on it were known to have explicit feelings of rage against Gary.
I mean, anytime you have a crime scene this large and this many witnesses, you have to follow every possible lead.
For Detective Jim Gamber, one person with hints of rage was an ex-girlfriend whom he'd broken up with while she was pregnant with his child.
There's a lot of people that talk about how volatile Robin Gardner was.
Robin Gardner was pregnant when Gary left her.
And according to investigators, Robin was so angry, she'd thrown a glass vase at his head.
And this, of course, sent Detective Gamber down another path of like, okay, is this somebody else who might have wanted, you know, Gary dead?
But having met Robin and talked to her, it's like, nah. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen right there. It wasn't going to be, she was going to come back in 6 months and blow his car up.
Even though she was angry at Gary, it was sort of a anger that had dissipated. there wasn't really a reason to investigate her further.
There were a lot of rumors going around about threats that Gary may have received. A lot of the early focus was on people that invested and then Gary lost the money.
There was no shortage of them to check out. When Gary went bust in May of '94, he left $27 million worth of creditors holding the bag, and that was including those Mexican and Chinese investors. Investigators were able to clear all of them. But there was a man who not only got stiffed by Gary Triano, he got humiliated by Gary too, a Tucson trustafarian named Neil McNeese.
Neil McNeese was, by all accounts, a billionaire by inheritance. He was sort of a trust fund baby, if I could use that term, and he had a lot of money. His own Learjet, I think it was, traveled a lot.
He even had his own personal doctor, Lawrence D'Antonio, accompanying him on his travels.
My job was to keep him alive. He was a terrible drug addict and an alcoholic.
He became acquainted with Gary Triano. They probably frequented the same clubs or things of that nature. And Neil McNeese was somebody who had a lot of money to invest or spend on people.
According to investigators, Gary Triano had approached Neil for 80 grand to invest in him immediately. But McNeese wanted collateral for his $80,000 loan, and newly divorced Gary had just the answer.
So Gary Triano gave Neil McNeese Pam Phillips's supposed diamond ring that Gary represented was worth $250,000.
About 5 days later, he goes to his jeweler who tells him, "You're the proud owner of a ring worth about $7,000. It's a cubic zirconium." And Neil went crazy. Went crazy in the jeweler shop, went absolutely crazy.
And so Neil McNeese did not want to be taken as a fool. And so it was said that he had put Gary on a kill list.
It was titled "To Kill." Right at the top of the list, the day I originally saw it, was Gary Triano. And he never stopped saying, "I'm going to kill Gary Triano," from that day.
And his former associates allege, along with his vast wealth, McNeese also knew the right people, people that had the capacity to make a bomb.
The moment I heard on the newscast on my car radio that the victim was Gary Triano, I absolutely believed 100% that he was assassinated by Neil McNeese.
What we could find out about Neil McNeese is that he was in a lot of loudmouth, but very little follow-through. Nothing to connect McNeese to a device. And if he killed Gary, that didn't get him his money back. And he wasn't so financially hit that, he was down to his last dime. So did he do it? Again, not a strong connection.
So little hard evidence pointing to anyone for Detective Gamber. But then, out of the clear blue, Pima County receives a call from an out-of-state detective about an abandoned minivan some 500 miles away in California. It's crammed with stuff that has a name on it. Tucson, Arizona desert. Atop the snowy mountains of Colorado. Two cases are about to collide, and there's a tantalizing new lead about to emerge, thanks to a fraud investigation by Aspen detective James Crowley into a local named Ron Young.
What I was hearing was he had a great, line to get into your business. He was going to do all these great things for you. I'm so awesome, and I'm going to make you a ton of money.
Ron Young was someone who was, even for the mid-90s, fairly adept at computers and establishing an online presence even back then.
He comes to the attention of Detective Crowley after two local businessmen allege that Ron has stolen more than $100,000, and they both want to press charges.
If Ron became your business manager, he would instantly want all the books, access to all the financials, which gave him an opportunity to transfer money out of your bank account to his own bank account, get credit cards issued in his name on your account.
So Crowley gets search and arrest warrants and sets out to pay Ron Young a visit at his place on Snow Bunny Lane.
So this is Snow Bunny Lane where Ron Young lived at one point. On the corner where the carport was Ron's house. So we get there and he's gone. He's nowhere to be found.
Ron Young is 6'6", maybe 300 pounds. But where is he gone? 6 months later, Detective Crowley gets a call from the cops in Yorba Linda, California.
What happened was that police in California find an abandoned van, and it's a rental van out of Aspen.
Authorities discovered that the abandoned Dodge Caravan was rented by Ron Young. It was parked outside his parents' house.
And it's an unlocked van. And so when police do come and they open the van, they discover some very unusual things inside.
And as Detective Crowley learns, more than one of those things has Gary Triano's name on it.
There's divorce documents between Gary Triano and Pam Phillips. There are maps of Tucson. There are lists of names of associates with Gary Triano.
And they discover something else that's sort of unusual. It's a sawed-off shotgun. I mean, fraud suspects, they're not usually violent.
It was Crowley's first encounter with Gary Triano's name. But he recognized the name Pamela Phillips because earlier that year, she had walked into the Aspen Police Department and accused Ron Young of stealing money from her bank accounts.
In investigating Ron, there were 2 fraud cases initially, and then Pamela had come in to report the 3rd fraud case.
Detective Crowley had an outstanding warrant for Ron Young's arrest. So why did his still-at-large fraud suspect appear to be all up in the business of this Gary Triano from Tucson, Arizona? Then came November 1st, 1996, and the morning after.
I was sitting at my desk in the investigations office and reading the paper and saw the headline.
It was the shocking pipe bomb murder of Gary Triano.
And it kind of, you know, when you get an adrenaline dump and you get that kind of metal taste in your mouth, and that's kind of what it was.
And so Detective Crowley calls Pima County Sheriff's Department.
And I said, here's what I have. You might be interested in this.
And when Pima County gets this call from Detective Crowley, laying out the evidence retrieved from the van, especially those documents with Gary Triano's name on them, they finally have the connection they've been waiting for.
So what was an Aspen fraud case now is firmly interwoven with our homicide case.
Detective Crowley also hands over to detectives in Tucson a notebook from the van. Inside that notebook, a handwritten list of names, including Gary Triano's niece, Melissa.
They brought it to me, and in that notebook was Melissa Triano, license plate Missy. My license plate said Missy on a black Corvette, and that was my car. So he had been following me, and it was terrifying.
But now, no one can find where Ron Young is or get any answers he might have. And so the investigation into the identity of Gary's killer, it stalls for nearly 10 years. Until an expert enters the case who's got decades of experience. And that helps investigators with the identity of Gary's killer from a painstaking reconstruction of the bomb itself.
People think when the explosion occurs, everything goes away. Well, it doesn't.
We are in New Mexico, Anthony.
Yes.
A typical land of enchantment landscape around us here, right? Kind of desolation and
mountain desert area.
So a decade after the murder of Gary Triano, the case has gone stone cold. The Sheriff's Department decides to invite one of ATF's top bomb experts, Anthony May, into the investigation, just to see if he could help determine who built that bomb that wound up in Gary's car. Anthony, when I think of blowing stuff up in New Mexico, I think of the movie Oppenheimer, something in Los Alamos, right?
Yeah, a little bit south there, but yes.
You guys gotta hold on, hold on.
So if you go just outside Socorro, New Mexico, you'll find this 40-square-mile field laboratory, and it's called the Energetic Materials Research and Testing Center, EMERTEC for short. It's a research and training division of New Mexico Tech, and it's a place where highly skilled bomb specialists do their work with explosives. So we're blowing something up today, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We're going to reenact a bombing that occurred in 1996 that ended up taking Gary Triano's life.
Today, Anthony May is going to take us inside his field of explosive expertise and show us just how this kind of detective work can help authorities identify a killer. What kind of car is this that we're looking at right here?
It's a Ford Mercury Grand Marquis. It's not the exact vehicle, but it is similar in body style and chassis.
Meliton Flores is a research engineer and assistant director here at EMERTEC. He and his team are the ones who found the car and put together a pipe bomb, all closely resembling Gary Triano's car and what was inside it on the evening of November 1st, 1996.
Will be safely tucked away in the upper bunker. We have a flag that you'll see behind your shoulder there. That flag is currently in the down position, which means that testing is imminent.
The EMERTEC engineers have these high-speed cameras ready to film the explosion at 20,000 frames per second.
Morning, everybody. So today we got a recreation shot of a 1996 bombing in Arizona. It's going to be a pipe bomb. Once the bomb goes off, we're going to wait until for Merkel he'll give it the all clear. It's the desert, it's hot, so drink plenty of water. We got snakes, we got scorpions, we got spiders, so watch out for all that.
Tesla. Yeah, hold on. Let me do a quick roll call up here.
Like with the Triano case, the pipe bomb is placed in a blue canvas bag and it's positioned on the passenger seat. The technician spools out the firing fuse. We take cover in a bunker some 2,000 feet away.
Everybody's under cover?
All right, we're all good here.
Tesla, your range.
Okay, you ready, Tesla? 2, 1.
That sound was amazing.
I think it could have been the back window that was flying out.
Oh, is that right?
Starting to see some smoke now. I think, it's smoldering a little bit.
Yeah, it looks that way.
The car's on fire.
Every bomb scene tells a story, and the debris scattered by this bomb is much like the debris that was scattered after the bomb that exploded in Tucson on November 1st, 1996. Debris gathered up by law enforcement that Anthony May would go on to analyze. So after the all clear, we move in for a closer look.
It would be up, most of it is going to be up over that bridge. Well, we're going to walk into the blast scene. Now we're starting to pick up some heavy components, and now we're going to decide, is it from the car? Is it from the bomb? And what I'm seeing is car parts here, the door handle. As I can see already, the roof of the car is over here. Looking at the roof of the car, most of our fragments went straight up.
Does it matter to you that it went straight up?
It'll tell me the orientation of that pipe bomb.
That you can take what seems like a scene of classic chaos and create any kind of order out of it is remarkable to us.
That's the objective. Take a look at what the crime scene is telling you, what the evidence tells you, and then go from there.
It is one of the most notorious murders in Tucson history. Opening statements.
Back in 2005, it was Anthony May taking the fragments of that 1996 bomb that killed Gary Triano and reassembling the device, hoping that the process would offer some leads in a case that had grown cold.
This is actually a picture of when Jim brought the evidence up to me. It's just kind of like a puzzle now. I am trying to match pieces. This is the pieces of the pipe.
So what specifically did you find as you looked at all that evidence?
People think when the explosion occurs, everything goes away. Well, it doesn't. There's 95 to 99% of the device still there. It's in just different configurations. I was able to determine the size, and it was about a 17-inch pipe bomb.
So it took Tony May about a month to piece back together all the fragments of the bomb, and he showed us the reproduction he was able to construct. So somehow from all this material, you're able to recreate something that looks very much like what the actual bomb must have been.
Yes.
Is there any indication that Gary Triano would have seen that bag in the seat next to him?
Well, he in fact did see it. There was a witness that said that he saw Gary Triano get in the car and then lean over into the passenger seat, meaning that the bomber was also somewhere close by with the remote control device, and when he saw him lean over the bag, that's when he initiated the device.
And just like any puzzle, once the pieces start to fit together, there's a picture that emerges that would eliminate some suspects and start to bring others into sharper focus.
We had found a piece in the debris here of parts that were soldered together. There were globs of solder.
The globs instantly told you, not somebody who does this on a regular basis.
Doesn't do it on a regular basis. The question to me was, is this a professional hit? Are we dealing with a mafia? From the design, the construction, the soldering, the battery, I don't see that.
Turns out the outdated 6-volt battery used on the bomb was also a clue about the bomber's age.
That indicated to me that we're not dealing with some young individual who has experience with AA batteries or 9-volt batteries.
That it might have been an amateur building their first bomb, and that the choice of battery was suggesting an older suspect, excluded organized crime, and got authorities focusing on the man with the disorganized van, Ron Young.
So the way the device was built fit Ron's profile. So it's just another brick in the wall kind of thing.
And as investigators continued to build that wall, they are intrigued by the enticing link between Ron Young and Gary's ex, Pam Phillips. Were they more than business partners? And will unearthed audio recordings reveal whether Pam was possibly an accomplice in the murder of her ex-husband Gary Triano, or a victim of Ron Young?
I don't even want to talk about it right now.
If I ever found out that you compromised me, you're, a fried duck.
It's a story about sexualizing audio tape and a sensational bombing.
It was something that absolutely shook Tucson to its core. It was horrific. It was violent.
I'm the killer. I got my gym bag, open the door, put it down, close the door. I walk away.
The ex-wife, the business manager, the murder. How do they all fit together?
Pamela Phillips was a socialite, a beautiful blonde bombshell. She was the quintessential trophy wife.
Why would she have been so mad at him?
Nothing went her way through that whole divorce, and she was furious by it.
And so she's on the hunt for her next husband.
She said, I need to find a husband that is worth $20 million or more.
Finding them would be the real problem.
Is it okay to talk?
Yeah.
Copy down what you need to copy in your own code and throw this away.
To this day, I keep calling it the treasure trove of evidence. It was astounding what was there.
If he was a real hitman, why is he not threatening her with her life or threatening her family or kids?
It's a sensational trial, complete with sex, money, and murder.
It's summed up in one word: greed.
Here in Tucson, Arizona, handsome, self-confident land developer Gary Triano was married to Pamela Phillips, herself a charismatic player in Tucson real estate. They were a power couple with expensive tastes and the assets to satisfy them.
It was almost like the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
But after the real estate boom went bust, Gary went bankrupt.
Pamela began to realize maybe Gary wasn't all that he was cracked up to be. Like maybe there were little cracks in this armor here. Because Gary started to let her in on some things, like he's indebted to multiple people.
Following their divorce, Glam Pam and their 2 kids moved to Aspen.
I saw Gary as being somewhat downtrodden, somewhat sad. Sad he was losing his family, sad he had lost all his earthly riches.
But ever the optimist, Gary felt confident he'd be on top once again soon. Until November 1st, 1996, when a car bomb blew his comeback and his car to smithereens in a parking lot just like this one. But who or what wanted Gary Triano dead? Despite Pam and Gary's bitter divorce, investigators could see no immediate connection between Pam in Colorado and Gary's pipe bomb murder in Arizona, until cops stumbled across that minivan in California belonging to Ron Young, packed with documents with Gary and Pam's names on them.
It was great because we had no association with Pam and the murder until then. Before we had Pam was in Aspen, the bomb went off in Tucson. How could Pam have pushed the button? Okay, now we have that connection. We have Ron Young bridging that distance for us.
Pima County investigators needed to understand the complex relationship between Pam Phillips and Ron Young. According to friends, that relationship had begun here on Aspen Snow Bunny Lane, where Ron Young lived. Pam was practically his next-door neighbor.
And at the time, Snow Bunny Lane in that area was where kind of working people, doctors, lawyers, normal people in Aspen lived.
It was not Pam Phillips' kind of neighborhood, a long way down from that mansion in Arizona. So she asked her neighbor, Ron Young, to help out on her business idea. It was an astrology website called starbabies.com.
If your baby was born under a certain time, you could get their zodiac and all that. It was that type of thing that Pam wanted to do, and start up a little business like that. And he helped set that up.
A new-in-town ski instructor who'd gotten a side gig as a live-in Manny for Pam's 2 kids, Kevin McDonald says he saw a lot of Ron Young.
He would come over and spend time with Pam, and was helping her with the star babies, and then he would have dinners with her. And I could see that there's more than just being the down the street neighbor after the kids were asleep. Pam didn't want them to see them being intimate or being more than just friends.
Kevin would recall Pam as a good and caring mother to her kids. But according to Pam's friends, starbabies.com and Ron Young were only part of her plan to return to the top of the mountain here in ski country.
Pam was always out in the different private bars and private clubs in Aspen trying to meet rich men. And because she said, I need to find a husband that is worth $20 million or more.
If it was Pam's long-term goal, it was fueled by her short-term needs. She was running out of money. And for that, she blamed Gary Triano. Why would she have been so mad at him?
Nothing went her way through that whole divorce, and she was furious by it. And she wanted money. She needed money to continue her lifestyle.
Once Pam and Gary had cruised on luxury yachts and private planes. Now, Pam was steamed that Gary was making her pay to fly the kids back to Aspen after his visit with them.
Pam told me one night after I put the kids to bed, she just said that she was down to her last $60,000. So I knew that she was worried. She was bleeding money. She wasn't making any money.
Pam was convinced that Gary was hiding assets, so allegedly She asked Ron Young to find them.
Pam's chief complaint during this entire relationship is she's not receiving enough child support from Gary, and he must be hiding assets. But Ron is still really pissed off that he's not being paid for his services.
Because of their business relationship, Ron had access to her accounts, and he allegedly started taking out money for himself. That's what led Pam to report Ron's alleged fraud in the first place. Yet it wasn't long after that Ron Young skipped town and vanished. He was one step ahead of an Aspen arrest warrant.
After Pam came in the initial time, and I asked her to provide follow-up documentation, she never came back.
Ron Young is nowhere to be found, but Pima County sheriffs decide to talk with Pam.
And then when you go to interview Pam, she minimizes Ron Young. Oh, he was not involved in my life. He gave me a little financial advice and things like that.
Yet less than a year later, Pam is out of Snow Bunny Lane and into a $1 million home. Why were authorities so interested in her change of fortune?
Pam had 2 million reasons to kill.
Pothole number 3, allegedly. That's how the twice-divorced Pam Phillips referred to Ron Young, her sometime lover, neighbor, and business associate, in a note she wrote to her aunt.
Ron was not her type. She was used to handsome, charismatic, wealthy men, and Ron was nothing like that.
When Pam moved up to Aspen, she purported not to have any money, was in financial hard times.
There was, however, a $2 million life insurance policy on Gary Triano's life, set up to take care of his 2 kids with Pam.
They were the beneficiaries, with the proviso that if they were under the age of 18, then Pam was the one that would receive the money and appropriately apply it to the children's lives.
Now, even with a friend's assistance, Pam's financial straits were affecting her ability to pay for that policy.
And then we find out that when Pam learned of Gary's death, she was actually almost 30 days in arrear on her premium payment.
Pamela Phillips became hysterical. Not hysterical over Gary's death, but hysterical over the fact that the premium had not been paid for the month of November.
And they rushed a FedEx payment to the insurance company that got there too late. The insurance company, though, honored it anyway.
And 15 days later, Pamela makes a claim on Gary's life.
So it took until January of 1997 before the insurance company paid. Pam got a little over $2 million.
Pam Phillips wastes no time. As soon as she gets this $2 million life insurance proceeds, she goes out and she buys her dream mansion. And it's this home in Meadowood. It has its own ski lift. It's buttressed against the mountains. It's got these like massive wooden doors. It has marble all over the floor.
So as Pam was spending that life insurance money and climbing back into Aspen society, Gary's murder remained unsolved. It was a burden on the entire Triano clan, the notoriety haunting their every move.
If I said my name, you know, I get 1 million questions or 1 million comments on the matter. Are you related to Boom Boom Triano? Like horrible things people would say.
They would refer to your uncle as Boom
Boom. Boom Boom Triano was one. There was all kinds of weird things that they said.
So by 2005, this case had really become a cold case.
So we had this one anomaly, Ron Young. And it was, where's Ron Young? Where's Ron Young? Aspen PD had the arrest warrant, so he could be arrested anywhere within U.S. jurisdiction, and just nothing was coming of it. He was like a puff of smoke.
In hopes of teasing Ron Young out of hiding, Detective Gamber uses his network of undercover agents and investigators to approach the TV show America's Most Wanted.
The manhunt for November 19th is now in progress.
Then in 2005, a segment on Ron Young goes on the air.
Could this accused con man also be a cold-blooded killer?
Well, cops in Arizona want to find that out.
Right after the America's Most Wanted episode airs, it happens to catch the eye of a chiropractor in Florida whose patient is none other than Ron Young.
So this chiropractor out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, informs America's Most Wanted that not only is his patient Ron Young, but Ron has a scheduled appointment the very next day.
And that's a huge break in the case because now law enforcement, America's Most Wanted, they can all descend on Florida and make the capture.
Sure enough, Ron Young shows up in time for his appointment.
After his appointment, Ron is returning to his car when Broward County's fugitive unit makes the arrest. All of it captured on America's Most Wanted.
Right behind your back. What's your name? Hey, man. I asked you your name.
Ron Young.
Authorities hold Ron Young on fraud and weapons charges because when Ron's apprehended, he's got a loaded Colt .380 semi-automatic gun in his possession. So now, detectives race to Florida to see what Ron Young might have to say about Pamela Phillips and Gary Triano. But when they touch down, they get a big surprise, one that will blow this case wide open.
We walk over to this box, and there's some microcassettes sitting in there. And it's like, anybody have a microcassette recorder? And what was on there is, to this day, I keep calling it the treasure trove of evidence. It was astounding what was there.
I don't even want to talk about it right now.
What I'm saying is if I ever found out that you compromised me for your benefit, it'd be really unfortunate for you.
America's Most Wanted.
Right behind your back.
Ron Young is arrested in Florida.
Hey, man. I asked you your name.
Ron Young.
Crowley, it calls us and says they got him. So they start talking to Ron Young, and Ron says, sure, you can search my apartment. And yeah, you can search the storage locker I have.
He gives them kind of an extraordinary gift. And it's like he's opening up his treasure trove of evidence for law enforcement. And what they discover, is a major break in the case.
Among the physical evidence seized from Ron's properties, detectives find spreadsheets, FedEx receipts, thousands of email printouts, and letters that shockingly reveal Pam and Ron had been in contact the whole time Ron was a fugitive, even after Pam had accused Ron of fraud and minimized their relationship to police. I think the apparent connection between us is best kept at a minimum, she writes. I don't want to appear as too much of a helper, though you know I am. I love you and count on you. Pamela.
So there was obviously more of a relationship than she was letting on.
But then, as far as evidence goes, the coup de grace.
We walk over to this box, and there's some microcassettes sitting in there. And it's like, anybody have a microcassette recorder? And so we pop one of the tapes in, we hit play.
You sent my money yet? My principal.
I am not going to keep sending you more and more money unless I know that you can honor our agreement.
And it's Ron Young's voice and Pam Phillips's voice. We immediately turn the tapes off. We box those up immediately, and those go to the lab to be professionally transferred.
It takes months just for detectives to listen and catalog the dozens of hours of telephone conversations that Ron has secretly recorded. And the contents are stunning.
I'm really happy that your 1.6 was tax-free.
Just say yes. I will take the forward like it's been coming, and I'd like the balance of it as quick as possible. Yes.
Yes, I want it all. I want it all. I want it all as soon as possible. We have no disagreement.
You start to listen to the phone calls, and the next thing you hear is, you got your 2, I want my 4. Well, you have a $2 million insurance policy, and you have Ron getting $400 and some odd thousand in cash from Pam.
Recovered emails and FedEx receipts detail how, at Ron Young's direction, Pam made regular cash payments to him, choreographed, authorities believe, in a manner to avoid detection.
You start following Ron telling Pam, this is how you hide taking the money from your accounts and sending it as cash to me. And he gives her a detailed process to follow.
He was instructing her to take out certain amounts of money at different locations, use different accounts, don't mail from the same place twice, vary your pattern so no one gets wise.
Is it okay to talk?
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing that shows me having any contact since I left Aspen, or ever really. If you, for any reason, need to keep dates or numbers or anything else, obviously just transpose it into codes.
For investigators, this game of subterfuge and these under-the-radar payments from Pam to Ron is starting to smell like a murder conspiracy.
What he had on his computer was astounding. Pam was paying him on a monthly basis, and he had his own amortization table of the money Pam was paying him with the interest that was due, and it totaled something like $440,000.
Armed with this new evidence, police get a warrant to search Pam's place, the Aspen mansion her slice of the insurance money paid for.
In September of 2006, Pima County Sheriff's Department joined forces with the Aspen Police Department and surround her house, and they knock on the door and they say, "We have a search warrant."
Pamela answers the door and they tell her, "We have a warrant to search your house," and she said no and closed the door in their face.
Pamela Phillips is completely surprised by this. She tells the police, "Yeah, my lawyer's on the way," and the detective says, "I have a search warrant." So they come in, and the way she describes it is like they're scattering across her marble floors like rats.
While we're executing the search warrant, Pamela decides to leave, and we don't have an arrest warrant for her at that point, so she's free to leave.
She gets into her little Mini Cooper and drives off.
Meanwhile, after pleading guilty to firearms charges, Ron Young is sentenced to 10 months in prison in Florida. After his jail term, he's sent back to Aspen.
He gets extradited to Aspen to face the fraud charges. And it's there that the fraud charges get dismissed. After the charges are dismissed in Aspen, we don't have enough to charge him with the homicide yet. So he is free, but he's on parole from the federal prison.
Ron Young moves to his parents' house in Yorba Linda, California.
So there's all this stuff that's coming together. There's the suspicions about the life insurance policy, and now we've got Ron Young, who's an associate of Pam Phillips, and all these things in the van in California, the names and a notepad of people associated with Gary Triano, maps of Tucson, receipts from a hotel in Tucson near where Gary was living at the time.
After nearly 12 years, the police finally obtain arrest warrants, hoping to bring long-awaited justice in the case of Gary Triano.
We're going to do a simultaneous arrest. We've already put surveillance teams in Aspen, surveillance teams in Yorba Linda. We hit Ron and we arrest him. We go to hit Pam and we do a records check on her, and we find out she flew out of the country to destinations unknown. She was gone.
October 17th, 2008. Cops mount a large-scale operation to simultaneously arrest Ron Young and Pam Phillips for the 1996 murder of her ex, Gary Triano.
We have the arrest warrants. We've already put surveillance teams in Yorba Linda. We've coordinated with local law enforcement. We hit Ron and we arrest him. We extradite him back to Tucson.
But when it comes to arresting Pam, they have a rude awakening.
Pam Phillips, we have every reason to believe, is still living at her house in Aspen. We go to hit Pam and we do a records check on her, and we find out she flew out of the country. She was gone.
Pima County investigators named Young and Triano's former wife, Pamela Phillips, as suspects in the case. They're still looking for Phillips and believe she may be out of the country.
So we have to put out a notice with Interpol. So now the United States Marshals Service and the FBI become involved.
Unbeknownst to police, Pam is in Europe, and she's leaning into the alpine lifestyle in a swanky lakeside town in Switzerland called Lugano.
She has just picked up where she left off. She's recreated her world over there. She's hobnobbing with the elite. She's off hunting again for a rich, eligible bachelor. In fact, has been spotted with several.
while out in Lugano, it's just not Pam's style to keep a low profile. And so, sure enough, a local tipster hears news of Pam's murder indictment and picks up the phone.
I'm sitting at my desk, and I get a call. There's a gentleman who'd like to talk to you. He thinks he knows where Pam is. So everybody's poised to go arrest Pam in Lugano, Switzerland.
But there's a hitch. See, the Swiss government wants a guarantee that the U.S. won't invoke the death penalty. Gamber and his team are able to work out the details.
But when the Swiss police went to arrest her, yeah, she wasn't there.
Ultimately, there's a multinational effort that leads to Pam's arrest in Austria. And while she's sitting in a jail cell in Vienna awaiting extradition, back in the States, Ron Young goes on trial.
The trial itself started in March of 2010. We had been doing pretrial litigation for at least a year and a half leading up to that point.
Some of the challenges that the prosecution faced in Ron's trial was that it was a circumstantial evidence case. They didn't have any direct evidence that linked Ron Young to the bomb.
The prosecution acknowledges no one reported seeing Ron in Tucson on or around November 1st, 1996, nor did he have anything in his possession specifically tying him to Arizona or to Gary Triano on the date of his murder. However, the prosecution does have Anthony May.
My job was to determine what was used and build a reconstruction of the device, and then the device was used to present it in court for his prosecution.
He was able to recreate the entire bomb all the way down to the battery purchased from Radio Shack, the remote-controlled air switch used to operate it, to detonate it, and even down to the duffel bag purchased from Walmart. That was an impressive display in front of the jury, I think.
And the prosecution also had those micro cassette tapes.
I helped you on something that was, you know, beyond what anybody else in the world would probably do, and I think that deserves some consideration, since you're living off the benefits of it.
The prosecution makes the case that in their conversations, Pam and Ron were talking about the murder of Gary Triano.
I am not going to keep sending you more and more money unless I know that you can honor our agreement.
The prosecution points out to the jury an email that surfaced from Ron to Pam, referring to Gary as an 800-pound monster.
The communication between Ron and Pam was the crux of the case.
The defense countering that Ron was simply extorting money from Pam.
What Ron did was not valid. It was blackmail Pam.
Then there was also an out-of-the-blue prison witness with a prosecution-perfect account to tell the jury. Andre Mims, a cellmate of Ron Young's when he was in prison for the 2005 gun charges.
He looked me in my face. He said, Andre, I blew that up in his car.
For the prosecution, Ron Young's one statement to Andre Mims, how he blew Gary Triano up, might as well have been a confession.
But the defense claimed this testimony was made up and immediately called for a mistrial. The motion was denied.
I think we felt confident. I mean, as a prosecutor, even on a strong case, you're always concerned about the potential one outlier juror that could lead to a hung jury.
After 13 hours, the jury reached a verdict.
For the defendant, Ronald Kelly Young, guilty of the offense of first-degree murder.
Ron Young was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
Ron Young is sentenced to life in prison.
We can't tell you how many times we thought we would never see who killed my father.
But for Gary Triano's family, the story is far from over, and justice has not been served yet.
We still need Pam, and there's a long road still with that.
That long road would lead to a fateful night in July 2010. A plane with Pam Phillips on board, making its way from Vienna to an airport in Arizona, where Melissa Triano and Detective Jim Gamber were waiting.
It think her flight came in at midnight, and we stood outside of the airport and watched her come off the plane.
Pam's comment to the U.S. Marshals was, if Gamber's in the airport, I'm not getting off the plane. They walked her out of the jetway, turned her over to me. They had to walk her all the way out to a patrol car.
I wanted her to see our faces and to know that we were never giving up on bringing her to justice.
As Pam prepares to go on trial, her public defender would mount an ambitious murder trial defense.
This will not be a short trial when it starts. Phillips' defense has listed about 100 witnesses.
He's making these threats to embarrass her. He knows that she is in all these newspaper articles.
Could he surprise everyone and get Pam a not guilty verdict? His first wife to pursue Pam Phillips. Then, as a Tucson power couple, they lived high on the hog. Now, 17 years after he was killed, Pam Phillips was on trial for Gary's murder.
For anyone who likes a sensational trial, complete with sex, money, and murder, this one was worth the wait. It has it all.
The trial began February 2014. There was a ton of attention and anticipation. All eyes were on Pamela Phillips.
I think it was probably the biggest case we've ever had.
The Aspen socialite on trial for killing her ex-husband with a car bomb. Pamela Phillips maintains her innocence, but prosecutors say they can prove she's a killer.
For the Triano family, this case represents the ultimate hope in finally bringing justice for Gary. How was that trial for you and your family?
It was very difficult to sit through when photos or evidence was going to be shown that would be hard. I would get up and walk out.
What made it imperative that you be there then?
It was knowing the truth.
Prosecutors argued that the main reason that Pamela Phillips orchestrated this murder on her ex-husband was the $2 million life insurance policy.
The bulk of our evidence came from Ron Young, the FedEx receipts, the phone calls, the emails that Ron Young had saved.
With records taken from that abandoned minivan in 1996, prosecutors argue how Ron Young closely surveilled Gary Triano's comings and goings, as well as those of Gary Triano's relatives, which included very specific details about Melissa Triano, who took the stand.
The last line has your name on it again, correct?
Yes.
Melissa Triano. Just above your name, what does it say there?
Corvette convertible niece.
The prosecution then brings out a key witness, Laura Chapman, a former friend of Pam's, who recalls a conversation she says she had with Pam before Gary's death.
She said that she should just hire a hitman, have him taken out, and that the insurance policy was a $2 million insurance policy. And she said it would just be really easy to do because he was so predictable, because he played golf every day.
The defense claimed Laura's memory was faulty and that Pam was not desperate for the life insurance money because she'd lapsed on that last premium payment.
If you're going to do a murder for hire for the insurance money, aren't you going to be sure that the insurance policy is in place and has been paid?
But for the prosecution, big piece of the puzzle were those taped phone conversations between Ron and Pam, discussing Ron's alleged $400,000 cut of that life insurance policy, where, in the view of the prosecution, Ron says the quiet part out loud.
Right now, I want to know that we are capping it at 4. I don't want this nebulous thing out there that we're supposedly supposed to...
It's not nebulous.
Listen to me. I am very serious about this.
Well, I tell you, you're going to be very serious when you sit in a women's prison for murder.
Oh yeah, that for the jury was our smoking gun.
But defense attorneys assert Ron and Pam were not talking about the murder of Gary Triano. Instead, he was extorting Pam for money.
I'm terrified of everything.
I know.
I mean, I'm living in total fear.
He's making these threats to embarrass her. He knows that she is in all these newspaper articles as a suspect in her ex-husband's bombing. He wants to threaten her reputation in the Aspen community. If he was a real hitman, why is he not threatening her with her life or threatening her family or kids? That's what happens when you have a cold-blooded killer
The defense doesn't just try to point out how neither Ron nor Pam could be tied directly to the bomb at the scene of the crime. The defense goes one step further and says the culprit is somebody else entirely. Hot-headed billionaire heir Neil McNeese, out that 80 grand to Triano and enraged by his lies and deceit.
Neil McNeese. He lends Gary $80,000 and gets a ring for collateral. He finds out the ring is only worth $8,000 and he's livid. He's furious. He threatens to kill Gary per Dr. D'Antonio.
Remember, Dr. D'Antonio had come forward after Gary died, claiming that Gary Triano was on Neil McNeese's alleged kill list and that he was responsible for Gary Triano's death.
Lawrence D'Antonio was called to the stand, and this was really the crutch of the defense's argument.
I wouldn't describe Neil as a friend.
I heard Neil say he was going to kill Gary Triano probably 10,000 times. It was pure obsession. His hatred was pure obsession.
The defense argues that McNeese not only had motive, he also had the means, with a woodworker friend named Jerry Capuano, who they claim had a shop and the know-how to make a remote-controlled pipe bomb.
The other things found at Mr. Capuano's shop. You saw that little red thing that was used to put together wires. There was one of those at Capuano's shop. There's an exact one of those in the bomb parts that were found.
It makes for an interesting story. They're saying, oh, look at this. Neil McNeese was the real killer, and Capuano was the person who made the bomb. All of them are deceased, so we're not able to follow up on this.
Authorities continue to assert there's no evidence tying McNeese or Capuano to the murder. The McNeese family issuing a statement in 2014, maintaining their belief in his innocence and relief that justice might prevail.
But I mean, the bottom line is we don't have any question whatsoever that Pam Phillips hired Ron Young to kill Gary.
Pamela Phillips never testified during the entire trial. We got glimpses of her personality, right? During the trial, she would look at the camera, she would smile at the camera, even mouthing the words at one point, "I love you," to the camera during court proceedings.
The camera had always loved Pam right back. Now, after 2 months of testimony, it was time to see what a jury would feel about Pam Phillips as they decided her fate.
The lights flickered in the courtroom. My cousin Heather was sitting in front of me, and she turned and looked, and we just lost it.
The Phillips murder for hire trial. The Aspen socialite is accused of hiring...
After 26 days of testimony, with 100 witnesses, 670 exhibits, the fate of Pam Phillips lies in the hands of the jury.
Do you find the defendant, Pamela Ann Phillips, guilty of first-degree murder?
Quiet cries of joy and justice. Triano's family says today's verdict has been a long time coming.
Like seconds after the judge said guilty, the lights flickered in the courtroom. It was surreal.
What did that tell you, those lights
That he was there. That he knows.
Gary's family was relieved by all this. The murder was in 1996. Our trial was now 18 years later. I mean, I don't think they wanted it to be Pam, but they knew it was.
Pamela Phillips' attorney maintains his client is not responsible for her ex-husband's death.
The fact that she's going to prison is going to eat away at me the rest of my life.
Pamela Phillips was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
After hearing her sentence, the once prominent socialite turns to address a packed courtroom, the only way she could do so without facing questions.
I am innocent. I am innocent. I am innocent. Okay? This is hard. It's so hard for me. It's a nightmare.
She showed no remorse. She actually turned around to the gallery for the first time. At this point, she was just pandering to the camera.
And I don't understand how this can even happen, right?
Never any mention as to the loss of life. But everything came back to the impact it had on her personally.
Outside the courtroom, after losing their father almost 2 decades earlier, Gary's children expressing both gratitude and sadness at the outcome.
We'd like to thank all our friends and everyone who supported us through this entire time. And we're sorry that it had to come to this, because this woman was actually part of our family.
Meanwhile, Pam's accomplice, Ron Young, also spending the rest of his life in prison, and he's exhausted all of his appeals. Pam, however, is still fighting for post-conviction relief based on DNA evidence found back in 2014.
We found DNA on threads of 2 screws that were embedded into the platform, which was wood, for the pipe bomb. When that came in, we were able to exclude Ronald Young.
Pam's appellate attorney maintaining that new, more sophisticated DNA technology will prove that someone other than Ron Young and Pam Phillips murdered Gary Triano.
Well, the next step in the process, we did file our petition for post-conviction relief. I'm hopeful that we can do some genealogical testing if we can find the money to do that.
They get better DNA that come back and tie to Jerry Capuano, then that might get her a chance for a new trial.
Prosecutors stand by the verdict. They continue to say that neither billionaire Neil McNeese nor his friend Jerry Capuano were in any way responsible for Gary's murder.
Where I find fault with this is that they, didn't submit Gary Triano as a reference sample. Now, whose DNA do you think is probably all over that scene? How do you buy screws at a hardware store? You don't buy screws that have never been touched by another human being. So finding some lone DNA profile and a blast debris doesn't impress me.
How do you like to remember your Uncle Gary?
Every November 1st, I would go to La Paloma Golf Course and put flowers in the 18th hole.
At a local cemetery, there's a bench inscribed with his name and Gary's favorite poem, Rudyard Kipling's If, the classic tribute to the same endurance and optimism that Melissa always saw in her uncle, who in the face of life's setbacks and defeats sought always to remain admirably strong. Would you mind reading part of it for us out loud?
If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginning, and never breathe a word about your loss. And that's just how my uncle lived.
A beloved former school teacher and wife of a small-town mayor.
Charlotte was very compassionate about students and very well liked.
She was a wonderful mother.
Found murdered in her home.
It inflamed the community because of how popular she was.
Detectives find evidence of a violent struggle.
She had been savagely attacked.
You could see that her wrist was broke.
Who would kill this loving wife and mother?
There was nobody that you could think of that would want her dead. It's going to be one of those cases of a whodunit.
Suspicions run rampant in this small town.
People are trying to help the police crack this case, but it's just all of these rumors and innuendo. Somebody that was at a party bragging about killing Charlotte. He was spending money like it was going out of style. A lady reported that her boyfriend tried to strangle her. We're thinking that's a very good suspect.
Police close in, but a public accusation upends the case.
He gave a statement on live radio accusing him of the murder.
They said they finally realized who killed her.
He was in shock.
I never would have expected them to be a suspect that will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Lynette, Alabama, a small family-oriented town in the heart of the Deep South.
Lynette was a mill town. It sits right on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, one of Alabama's major waterways. I always felt safe when I was there.
Some people would leave their homes unlocked, but we just never had any crime there.
Lynette is a very tight-knit area. Everybody knows everybody here.
August 4th, 1998 was a lazy summer day in Lynette until the peace was shattered by a 911 call.
It was around 5:30 when we got the call of an unresponsive woman.
Police are surprised to learn the call has come from the home of the town's mayor.
Everyone was shocked that it was their house, and I was there within 2 or 3 minutes.
The 911 caller, Heather Waits, leads police inside to her unresponsive mother.
Heather was very hysterical, and the first thing she could say was, "Help my mom." The first thing I did was go and check for a pulse, and she was cool to the touch. And you could tell that she's been expired for a little while.
Police are stunned to find Charlotte Waits, the wife of the town's mayor, dead in her home. At first, it appears that Charlotte has suffered a tragic accident.
We noticed she did have a little foam coming out the corner of her mouth, so we thought that, maybe had a seizure or a reaction to a medicine.
As detectives look closer, they begin to suspect foul play.
There was red flags that this was more than just an accident.
Her right arm and the wrist area appeared to be broken. She had what appeared to be scratch marks on the bottom of her chin, and she had some red markings around her neck. We made a decision right then that we're going to proceed with a homicide investigation.
Detectives find signs of a violent struggle.
There was a picture that had been knocked off the wall. We could see the nail that was holding that picture up was bent down towards the stairway. So my theory is that it was a fight coming down the stairs.
It just looked suspicious. The fact that her purse was dumped over, but her purse was still there. You couldn't tell if it was a stage scene or if somebody had come in and she had interrupted a burglary.
Was Charlotte the victim of a robbery gone wrong, or did her killer want it to appear that way?
We didn't see any signs of forced entry. One of the investigators went to the utility room and found 2 bloody towels. So we want to find out who might have bled on those towels.
As forensics collect evidence, Charlotte's husband, Barry, arrives on the scene.
Barry worked at the National Guard Armory. At the time, Barry was the acting mayor.
The look on his face, he was in shock. He was very, very upset.
He started hyperventilating, grabbing his chest. He began to go into what we thought was a heart attack.
As Barry is rushed to the hospital, news of Charlotte's murder spreads.
I remember the state of shock that I felt. When I got down there to the emergency room, the girls were there, and of course they were upset. Their mother was dead, and their daddy was under a doctor's care for heart issues.
Investigators turned to Charlotte's daughters for information about their mother.
Charlotte was a very kind, gentle person, always smiling, and cared about others.
Charlotte studied education at Auburn University and got married to Barry Waits right after graduating in 1971.
She was a second-grade teacher. She was very compassionate about her students and just very well liked.
Later, Charlotte became a devoted school administrator.
She was genuine through and through. She just made such a nice reputation for herself in the school system and in the community as well. Barry was head of the National Guard Armory, and he would often let us use the armory for the science fair, social studies fair, and Charlotte, she was always there helping me with everything.
Charlotte and Barry had the perfect marriage. 2 great careers, and they had 2 daughters. Heather was going to college, and Kara was still in high school, getting ready to graduate.
When you was around them, you could feel the love. They were well respected in this community.
Charlotte was a wonderful mother. I could tell what a deep love she had for her family.
Who would take the life of this kind and caring woman, and why? Detectives question Heather about how she came to find her mother's body.
Heather came home for the weekend. As a college kid, it's time to get your clothes washed and get some good home cooking.
Heather said she came into the house, and then when she called out for her mom, And that's when she noticed her mom at the bottom of the stairs. And when she run up to her, she realized that she wasn't breathing.
And when she felt cold, she began to panic. And then that's when she called the ambulance. And then she called her dad.
Police are eager to question the mayor, but doctors say they want to keep him overnight for observation.
We did find out that he didn't have a heart attack. It was an anxiety-type situation. But we were never able to talk to Barry while he was in the hospital. He got out the next day. On Saturday morning following the murder, we were at the office, myself, the other investigators, and then all of a sudden Barry walks in.
When it's this type of murder, it's usually someone very close to them at the same time. Nobody would ever suspect the mayor of doing anything like this. Anyone that knew Barry knew that he's like a big teddy bear.
My knowledge of Barry at that point, I'd never seen him upset. He was just friendly and well-respected. Barry didn't fit any kind of profile to do this kind of crime. But we did take the opportunity to just look over him while we were talking to him, see if we could see any visible injuries, and we could not.
Barry offers to help with the investigation and agrees to be interviewed. Detectives ask him for his whereabouts the previous day.
He told us that the morning he had gone to the armory, just had a normal day. Around 11 or so, he left the armory and gone by the barbershop. He said it was full, so he went back to work the rest of the day until he received a phone call from his daughter telling him that she had found her mother. So he rushed home.
Investigators hope to verify the mayor's alibi, but they haven't established a clear timeline for Charlotte's murder.
The first day of business after the homicide, the only thing we had was a victim in a neighborhood that these things don't happen. It's going to be one of those cases of a whodunit.
Nobody disliked Miss Waits, and there was definitely nobody that you could think of that would want her dead.
As fear grips the town of Lynette, suspicion starts to fall on someone close to Charlotte's daughter.
Through talking to family, we had learned that Kara was dating a boy that her parents really didn't like because he was living a rough life, hand to mouth. Barry and Charlotte both told her that she was not going to see him. And then, of course, they learned that she was seeing him behind their back. At the time of the murder, Kara was still in high school and she was pregnant. I believe that Charlotte knew that Kara was pregnant.
Investigators wonder if there had been a deadly confrontation between Charlotte and her daughter's lover.
People have been killed for less. Maybe he thought, hey, I want to see your daughter, you're not letting me, so you're going to pay for it.
Coming up, the list of suspects grows.
People start calling the tip lines or saying, well, so-and-so told me so-and-so.
And small-town secrets are revealed.
He had been to prison for violent crimes.
People are starting to say, you're maybe not the person we thought that you were.
Then, new evidence stuns investigators.
He's got a money issue, and that's a flag.
But the prints did not match.
I can't put this behind me until it's solved.
You may think that you know who did the crime, but you may be wrong.
Just 24 hours into the investigation of Charlotte Waite's murder, police have their first suspect. Her 17-year-old daughter's boyfriend.
We had learned that at the time of the murder, Kara was pregnant.
Her boyfriend just wasn't the person that they wanted their daughter to be dating. So maybe there had been some type of conflict.
Police bring him into the station for questioning.
He told us that he knew that Barry and Charlotte didn't like him, but he said that the day of the murder, he was working with a grass cutting crew somewhere. We were able to go to the person that he was working for that day, and they verified his whereabouts through the entire day of the murder.
With Kara's boyfriend looking unlikely as the killer, detectives take a closer look at Kara.
The day of the murder of Kara, we determined that she was at work babysitting. Then we started looking at Heather. We were able to show that she was at Auburn University. She had actually left 20 or 30 minutes prior to finding her mother. We eliminated her.
It's been less than 2 days since Charlotte Waits was found dead, and the investigation is under intense scrutiny from the public and the media.
We did have a lot of pressure put on us from the beginning because it's the mayor's wife. He's a pillar of the community and she's a pillar of the community.
With this case being such a high-profile nature, there was a lot of eyes looking at us.
I was the host of the morning show on WRLD radio. We were getting calls from people all over the county. I knew Charlotte's family real well. There was so much speculation at the time.
Under the close watch of the media, police turned their attention back to the mayor's alibi.
On any homicide, when your victim is married, you will start inside and then you work your way out. We wanted to find out the timeline of his whereabouts to eliminate him as being a suspect.
Barry claims that on the day of the murder, he left work around 11:30 a.m. to run an errand, then returned.
Barry said that once he got back to the armory, that he sent a fax to his commander. We traveled to Birmingham to verify who he sent the fax to, and it showed us that Barry got back to the armory at the time that he said he did.
Police confirm Barry's fax receipt has a 12:30 p.m. timestamp, but investigators still don't know the exact time of Charlotte's murder. While they wait for the autopsy results, they hope Charlotte's coworkers can help provide the answer.
The people that Charlotte worked with told us that Charlotte had gotten to work that morning, and that afternoon they were having a baby shower for one of her coworkers. They told us that she left around 11 or so.
And she comes home to get fixed up to go out to the little baby shower.
They told us that they were getting ready to order out lunch and try to get in touch with her to find out what she wanted. Couldn't get an answer.
No one saw Charlotte again until Heather discovered her body nearly 6 hours later.
Our office was horrified. We just couldn't wrap our minds around the fact that our little ray of sunshine was dead. Sergeant Richard Carter was asking us a lot of questions, like, did Charlotte and Barry get along? Charlotte and Barry were always teasing with each other, and he was always being silly and funny, and she would roll her eyes at him, and they didn't appear to have any problems. We said what a wonderful husband he had been, and what a good daddy.
Investigators hope to get more information about Barry and Charlotte's relationship from their daughters.
We want to find out more about the dynamics of the family. But when the daughters realized that we were looking at their father as the suspect, they became upset with us. So they broke contact, and we've lost contact with them. When we were speaking to her friends and her family, nobody could provide anyone who could have a reason to kill Charlotte.
Hitting dead ends, investigators dig deeper and begin to look beyond Charlotte's immediate family. They request an interview with her brother, Gene.
Gene said he loved his sister tremendously, and her entire family. He talked about him and Barry being like brothers.
Then, Gene reveals a key piece of information.
Charlotte had an uncle that had passed away. Written into the inheritance, Charlotte got 50%.
And we're talking several hundred acres here, which is worth a good bit of money. At this time, they're starting to build auto manufacturing areas here, and you can get lots of money for selling land or land rights.
Gene tells police that the inheritance caused problems in the extended family.
There was this cousin who felt like he deserved part of that estate. So he was contesting the will.
I've actually had to try murder cases where people have shot each other over property lines, and that's nothing compared to thousands and thousands of dollars worth of property. And so you've got heightened tension.
Gene also tells investigators that Charlotte was due to meet her attorney about the inheritance on the day she was killed.
We don't believe in coincidence that on the day she was supposed to have a meeting with an attorney is the day that she was murdered. And at that point, Charlotte's cousin became suspect number one.
Detectives investigating the murder of Charlotte Waits have discovered she was about to inherit a large tract of land from her uncle, leaving another family member angry.
Charlotte's cousin, Wayne Rice, felt that he was entitled to part of it. And we're talking a substantial good bit of property.
She did not like conflict. And the day of the murder, she was supposed to have a meeting with an attorney. Of course, she never made the meeting.
Detectives want to know if Wayne went to Charlotte's home to confront her before the meeting.
Maybe he thought if she was eliminated, he would have more opportunity for him to get more money out of it. When we contacted Wayne, he agreed to meet with us, but not without his attorney present.
Police ask Wayne how he feels about being left out of the family inheritance.
He knew that disputing that will caused broken relationships, but he said that he didn't wish any ill will on Charlotte.
Investigators ask for his whereabouts on the day of the murder.
Wayne had told us that he had gone to work early that morning. He'd gotten off work, gone home. We wanted to find out, did he have any opportunity to come to Lynette, commit the murder, and leave with nobody seeing him. We talked to 3 of his co-workers, and they confirmed that he never left, didn't even leave for lunch.
With Wayne ruled out, police go back to the drawing board.
Once we were able to eliminate Wayne, we were kind of left, again, at point A. Who could commit this crime and leave and nobody see anything out of the ordinary?
2 weeks after Charlotte's murder, detectives received the autopsy report.
The pathologist explained that it was a strangulation.
The report concludes that the murder weapon was a piece of Charlotte's own clothing.
Miss Waits had on a blouse that kind of had the little strings that went across it. And those strings actually created the ligature mark around her neck. And were pulled from behind.
The autopsy also confirms that Charlotte suffered other injuries in the attack.
She was thrown to the floor in such a violent manner that she suffered a dislocated wrist and a head injury that by itself could have killed her.
And the report suggests that Charlotte was struck in the face.
The doctor felt like she was punched, which could have subdued her.
The blood on the towels found at the scene is identified as Charlotte's.
The bloody towels were kind of stuck down in the bottom and covered up, like somebody was trying to hide them.
I would have to describe the last few minutes of Charlotte's life as complete terror. She had been savagely attacked.
Police receive the crime scene fingerprint analysis and discover a print that doesn't belong.
And we get the fingerprint report back, and then there's some unidentified fingerprints. We can't put a suspect with those fingerprints.
Police run the prints through the Alabama State Database, but it doesn't produce a match.
This is so frustrating because you owe it to the victim's family to go make that arrest and always hoping that we're going to get that silver bullet that's going to put it all together, and you never get it.
Then, just a few days later, a local report of a violent assault draws detectives' attention.
Our patrol guys got a call one night to a residence in regards to a lady that called and reported that her boyfriend, Rodney Borum, tried to strangle her. When the officer wrote up the report, he said, "This looks awfully familiar to the case that you're working on."
Detectives interview the victim and are struck by the similarities in the attack.
She reported to the police officers that her boyfriend attacked her from behind, tried to strangle her, but she was able to get away from him.
We knew Miss Waits had been choked from behind, so you have to look at that.
Is this an isolated case or an ongoing pattern of violent attacks?
We realized that he had actually had a pretty extensive criminal history from another state. He had been to prison numerous times for violent type crimes. So we were extremely interested in Rodney.
Police obtained Rodney's prints from the Georgia State Database.
We sent those off to the crime lab to compare with the prints that were lifted at the crime scene. When we spoke to Rodney, it was explained to him that this crime looked a lot like what took place with Charlotte. So he knew without a doubt why we were questioning him.
As police look into Rodney's claim that he was working on the day of the murder, The lab comes back with fingerprint results.
We got notified that Rodney Boyle's prints did not match. And through his alibi, we were able to eliminate him from being in the area that day.
Police can't charge Rodney for the alleged assault on his girlfriend due to lack of evidence, so they let him go. Once again, the investigation hits a dead end.
You have to keep an open mind. Always be ready for something that's going to take you down a different path.
A few days later, a stunning piece of information comes in on the police tip line.
We'd gotten a tip that there was a man at a party bragging about killing Charlotte.
The tipster claims he overheard someone named Kenny Boyd confess to the crime.
He said that he had been at a party with Kenny Boyd, and that Kenny Boyd had told him that he had gone in to rob Miss Waits, and that she caught him burglarizing the house.
We thought this is what we needed. This is the tip that we need. It's going to get us where we need to be.
When police go to locate Kenny, they don't have to look very far.
When we went and found him, he was inside our county jail.
It's been almost 2 months since the murder of Charlotte Waits, and a witness claims he recently overheard Kenny Boyd confess to the crime.
We were told that Kenny Boyd was at a party bragging about killing Charlotte.
The witness also tells police that Kenny had an accomplice.
Kenny told them that they were breaking in Charlotte's house. Then Charlotte came home. They jumped her, killed her. Didn't mean to kill her, but did.
The two suspects are well known to police.
They were always in trouble, in and out of jail.
Detectives head to Lynette County Jail, where Kenny has been in custody for several days on an unrelated charge.
We got inside the jail, sat down in a cell, began interviewing Kenny Boyd. He said he didn't know her, and he said he did not commit the murder. He said, I don't even know where they live, but we want to find out what it was he did that day. Kenny begins to tell us that they are out going to a local store, stealing cigarettes, and then they're going into a different part of town, selling them for crack.
Detectives are skeptical of the account and want to hear what Kenny's partner in crime has to say.
We find out that the other suspect's in prison in Georgia. So we traveled into Georgia, and he tells us basically the same story. He says, yeah, we were stealing cigarettes.
With identical stories from two suspects, investigators look to confirm their alibi.
To verify his alibi, the only thing we can do is go to the store that he said that they were stealing cigarettes from.
Police search the store's security footage for proof the men were there.
At the time of the murder, it was documented on video that they are inside that store that he said they were in. It was very frustrating. You may think that you know who did the crime, but you may be wrong.
Later on, we found out the guy that had called the tip line on Kenny Boyd just basically didn't like Mr. Boyd.
Police are increasingly concerned that the tip line may be doing more harm than good.
That's the thing about a small town, and everybody knows everybody, and people start calling the tip lines saying, well, so-and-so told me so-and-so.
Through this entire case, we would continually get tips. At times we felt like they were good tips, credible. Other times we knew that they were just trying to meddle in the case. The hardest thing was all the different rabbit trails that we kept having to go down, because every single tip that we got, we had to chase it.
That's slowing the investigation down to a crawl, because at a trial, you've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody committed this crime. And to do that, you've got to disprove all of these bad tips and the rumors and innuendo.
With the investigation at a standstill, the public is increasingly angry that no arrest has been made in the 6 months since Charlotte's murder.
The people in this community were frightened. Any murder in a small town, people here know everybody, so you got a lot of pressure when you got a case like this.
The fact that Charlotte was so well known inflamed the community. I think there was a lot of angst because of how popular she was and how gentle she was.
Our hearts still ached. It was awful. I would go to her grave and wonder if your murderer comes here and looks. And at this grave, she was my dear friend. And I can't put this behind me until it's solved.
The pressure never lessened on this case. The community demanded that somebody gets brought to justice on this case.
As months turn into years without justice being served, Charlotte's loved ones carry on as best they can. Barry Waits is no longer mayor, but he continues to serve on Lynette City Council. His daughters, Heather and Kara, have both moved out of town.
The girls went on with their lives. Heather got married, and Barry moved on with his life. And he eventually remarried.
Every investigator always has one case that stays with them. You go to bed with it, you wake up with it. I never considered it a cold case because it always sat on my desk. It consumed you, especially in a small town, when you know the people involved.
3 years after Charlotte's murder, a bizarre development puts the case back in the spotlight.
Barry was on our city council, and Barry decided to run for re-election. Well, there was a gentleman who lived in the county who decided to run against Barry.
The person running for city council against Barry Waits at that time, his name was Rod Spraggins.
Rod was a bail bondsman. He was very well known throughout the community.
While on the campaign trail, Rod Spraggins makes a stunning statement in the local press.
Rod was quoted in the paper as saying that he was 100% convinced that Barry Waits had killed Charlotte.
3 years after the murder of Charlotte Waits, Rod Spraggins has publicly declared that he knows who killed her.
Rod said, Charlotte came to me in a dream and told me that Barry's the one that killed her.
Rod Spraggins gave a statement on live radio accusing Barry of the murder. And we got a lot of calls on that, you know. You got people openly saying it on the radio. Why can't y'all make an arrest?
Rod's comments raise eyebrows, but police are suspicious of his motives.
I think it might not have been taken as seriously knowing it was Rod.
Rod Spraggins he's a con man. One of those that just stirred up stuff. And I don't know what his intent was, but in our eyes as investigators, Rod had no evidence.
But then, Rod's rash allegation sparks an unexpected development in the case. As talk about Barry Waits spreads, new rumors emerge about a hidden and disturbing side of the former mayor.
I kept hearing these rumors. Barry was the caretaker of his mother's savings account. And it was my understanding that out of $100,000, there was $100 and some change left in the account.
We found out that his mother was actually losing her house. And people are starting to look at him going, man, you're maybe not the person we thought that you were.
Police decide to take a closer look at Barry's finances.
As we're pulling banking records, I discover where Barry had taken $12,000 out of his mother's account, put it into his personal account, and spent the money. And this had been prior to the murder. So I think he's stealing from his mother. Where did the money go?
You know, if you'll steal from your mother, you'll steal from anybody.
Further analysis of Barry's bank records lead police to suspect that Barry is hiding an illicit source of income.
We need to find out where he's stealing money from. So, start another side investigation into his financial dealings at work.
Investigators interview Barry's superior at the National Guard Armory.
The commander was telling me that Barry really doesn't have any way to steal money, but they're allowed to rent out the armory for weddings and stuff like that. The commander said, but he hasn't rented this thing out in quite a while.
Investigators find that Barry had been renting out the armory without notifying his superiors.
Barry was using his position to rent the armory out, and then he was holding the money on his own, and that actually amounted up to a pretty substantial amount.
Barry had worked for the National Guard Army for at least 20 years. When they realized that he was stealing money from them, they were in shock. They couldn't believe it.
Barry agrees to talk to police about the alleged embezzlement.
We went to interview him in regards to the theft. He confessed right away about the theft, gave us a full statement. We indicted him, and he ended up working out a plea bargain agreement. And he was sentenced to 6 months in jail.
With Barry temporarily behind bars, investigators shift their focus to one crucial question. Could his greed and financial desperation have had something to do with Charlotte's murder?
Just because you're a thief doesn't make you a murderer, but because you need money real bad, that is motive for you to kill somebody. Barry's got a money issue, and that's a flag.
Police discover a pattern of behavior that began years prior, during his marriage to Charlotte.
At the time of the murder, they were behind on several payments, car payments, telephone. They were behind in their utility bills. Although we don't know where the money's going, couldn't determine if Barry had a girlfriend or anything, couldn't find any gambling problems, no drug issues.
Police finally uncover the nature of Barry's voracious spending.
We learned that Barry had a problem playing the stock market, and he had lost a bunch of money. He would do it without Charlotte knowing it, because it was totally against her wishes.
Investigators develop a theory of the murder that revolves around Charlotte's disputed inheritance.
Charlotte's cousin, Wayne Rice, he was contesting the will, so we thought she wanted it settled. And Barry did not want to settle. He was trying to talk her into holding out. Don't give Wayne Rice any money. And she was supposed to have a meeting with an attorney on the day that she was murdered.
Did an argument erupt over the inheritance, leading Barry to murder his wife?
I never would have expected Barry to be the suspect in Charlotte's death. Now, later, doubts began to cloud my mind.
Money had to be a factor in this murder case. I never felt like he went home to kill her that day. I think it was a fight, and I felt that if I could ever get him to talk to me again, I could get a confession from him.
Police ask Barry for another interview. He agrees.
I told him our goal was to continue to work on his wife's murder case, but we needed to talk to him some more. He asked me, can I call my wife? And the state investigator told him the only person you can call is your attorney. Well, that pissed him off. So he said, fine, let me talk to my attorney. So ruined any chance we had to confession.
Once again, the investigation goes cold.
There was some angst in the community. We don't want an unsolved murder. We want closure to this case. And I don't think it was ever a case where the police didn't want to bring this to trial. I think it just took time to put a puzzle together.
Police are stunned when nearly 5 years after Charlotte's murder, a pair of unexpected witnesses come forward.
Barry's daughters, they went to the DA's office to their crime victims advocate.
After refusing to speak with police for years, Heather and Kara provide investigators with explosive new information.
And then finally, after so many years, they were ready to offer what they could to find justice for their mother.
The daughters of murder victim Charlotte Waits are finally ready to talk to police after years of silence.
That was a big turning point for us because prior to the time, the girls wouldn't talk to us because the investigation was pointing to their father.
As time went on, Heather and Kara began to have doubts about Barry's innocence.
When Heather and Kara came forward, they began to tell investigators about their dad stealing money from them.
The women provide a detailed account of how their father had left them penniless.
Because of Barry being a suspect in his wife's murder, the insurance company would never pay her death benefit. At some point, he was able to convince the insurance company to leave the money to the daughters.
At that point, Barry made his daughters an offer for Charlotte's inherited property.
He said, if you'll give me that insurance money, I will give you the land. So they give their dad the money. But when the land dispute settled, he signed over the property to his new wife and left his daughters out to dry.
As police dig deeper, they learn how Barry had manipulated his daughters into silence.
The youngest girl had been being told by her father, you're the main suspect in this case. You can't talk to the police because everybody in this town believes that you killed your mother.
Detectives also find out that Barry tried to throw police off his trail by providing false tips.
He's been submitting Kara's name, submitting the boyfriend's name, throwing red herrings at us. You're making us chase down rabbit holes.
Now they've learned what kind of person their dad is, and they said they finally realized that their dad killed their mother.
With the women offering to testify against their father, the district attorney reviews the evidence and decides to prosecute the case.
The day that we were able to have that warrant served, it was a good day.
Barry is charged with the first-degree murder of his wife of over 2 decades, Charlotte Waits. But the case is not a slam dunk.
You can convict on circumstantial evidence, but when you do that, you have to rule out every other plausible explanation.
The trial begins in November of 2006. Prosecutors begin by describing how and why Barry killed his wife. They assert that Barry left work around 11:30 a.m. to confront Charlotte at home about her disputed inheritance.
So Barry left the armory, went straight home to talk her out of making that settlement offer.
And Barry comes home, and they start arguing. And she says, this is my family, and I'm going to do it, and this is my decision.
Then, Barry turned violent.
And at that point, he gets her. It caused her nose to bleed, and she wipes up with towels, and that was enough. She's just getting out of there and getting away from Barry.
But Barry doesn't let Charlotte escape.
He reaches and grabs her shirt and pulls her shirt back and starts choking her. And he pulls it so tight that he absolutely strangles the life out of Miss Waits. And then he takes her and just kicks her down the steps. He goes down and leans over the body to make sure that she's dead.
Prosecutors say Barry attempted to cover up his crime. He hastily hides the bloody towels and dumps Charlotte's purse.
And then he leaves and he starts putting his alibi together. He then goes back to the armory and he sends a fax, and that fax is supposed to be putting him out of the time frame of being at the house the time she's killed.
The prosecution shows that Barry had sufficient time to commit the murder.
There was an hour-and-a-half time frame from when Mr. Waits had left the armory and back to the armory when he sends a fax.
And prosecutors proved that every other suspect had an airtight alibi.
Every other name, every other person that was mentioned, we can eliminate them. But we could not eliminate Barry.
Later, an expert rules out the possibility of an unknown intruder based on further analysis of the unidentified prints at the scene.
The fingerprint expert says these are little kids' fingerprints. They don't have anything to do with this crime. But Barry Waits' fingerprints were down low, close to Charlotte Waits' body.
Finally, Barry's daughters take the stand.
You could read it on their faces and you could hear it in their voices. They were 100% convinced that their dad killed their mother.
After a brief deliberation, the jury reaches a verdict.
When the jury came back guilty, it wasn't relief. It was just a feeling of calm.
I went to her grave that afternoon, and I said, okay, sweet girl, you can rest in peace, because we know that your killer is going to pay for what he did.
Barry Waits, the former mayor of Lynette, is sentenced to 40 years in prison.
I think at one time, Barry was a person that intended to take care of his family. But whatever demons he had that made him burn up his family's money, his mother's money, consumed him, overtook him, and the need for money was more important than his wife's life or his daughter's love.
It was a real shock because, you know, he was a neighbour.
It was a real inner feeling, we've got to solve this for this young kid here.
Obviously an evil man. I would find it hard to forgive him.
In our minds, there was more to tell. This couldn't be the first time that he'd done this.
On Sunday, November the 26th, 2000, the worried mother called the police, telling them that her daughter hadn't come home after Christmas shopping. When initial inquiries proved fruitless, West Yorkshire Police launched Operation Conifer, one of the largest missing persons investigations in their history. Despite all their efforts, it was 9 excruciating months before they found out what had happened to her. Bramley in West Yorkshire is a suburb of the city of Leeds. Once a picturesque village with a rich industrial past, it was redeveloped into the Bramley of today, but it has retained its strong sense of community.
People do gather, look after one another, so to speak, like to see one another and have a chat.
Everybody knows everybody. They are pretty friendly. You know, personally, I don't know any nasty person that lives in Bramley as a community.
At 7 p.m. on Sunday, the 26th of November 2000, West Yorkshire Police received a phone call from a Sharon Hawkshead, reporting her 16-year-old daughter, Leanne Tiernan, missing.
Her mother gave us a description, and that was of a 16-year-old girl, slightly built. She was under 7 stones, with long brown hair, light brown hair.
Police immediately got to work interviewing family and friends to piece together her movements that day.
She waved goodbye to her family and set off on the short bus ride into Leeds with her best friend, Sarah, to buy some Christmas presents. Leanne bought Sarah some jewellery for Christmas, and she put those in her pocket, and they caught the bus back then from the city centre back to their home at Bramley. Leanne got off the bus with Sarah at Sarah's stop, which was 2 or 3 stops before where Leanne would have ordinarily got off. But Leanne, being the kind of girl she was, she wanted to make sure Sarah got home safely. And by waving Sarah off where she did, near to Sarah's home, that meant that as she entered the darkness of Huffley Gill.
By this time, it was 5 p.m. Huffley Gill was a secluded, tree-covered ravine with a path at the bottom. It was no place for a young girl on her own, even one in a hurry to get home.
It would have taken Leanne probably about 20 minutes to walk from that point to get home, just over half a mile, between half a mile and 3/4 of a mile.
At 5:30, Sarah rang Leanne's home, but Leanne wasn't there. Mum Sharon was concerned, but when she found out what route her daughter had taken, concern soon turned to alarm.
She realised that she'd walked through Huffley Gill, which is pitch black at that time of day, even though it was only 5 o'clock. Leanne's mum started ringing Leanne's phone frantically. It rang for about 20 times and just rang off. She rang it again. It rang for 4 times and then was seemingly cut off. Panic started to set in from that point on. And after a quick search round the Gill by family and Sarah and friends, the alarm was raised and Leanne was reported missing.
It was now 7 p.m. and Leanne had only been missing a few hours, but police knew time was of the essence. The case was assigned to Chris Gregg, who was a detective superintendent at that time.
From the outset, when Leanne was reported missing, you hope that there's just going to be an innocent explanation, that she'll return, she's gone off to her friends, or there's a secret boyfriend that Mum and Dad don't know about.
Police started searching immediately, and it soon became clear just how massive the task facing them was.
That area is quite a dense urban area, a lot of areas to search. There's an area with lots of housing, commercial premises, there's a river, there's a canal, there are drainage shafts, there are a whole range of search areas that had to be considered.
The next morning, with Leanne now missing for 12 hours, Operation Conifer was launched. The hunt for Leanne was on.
And it was important that we literally, to use the cliche, left no stone unturned. And the search teams went through here, searching the whole area for anything as small as the small items of jewellery that we knew Leanne had bought that day for a friend, looking for the mobile phone, an umbrella, any telltale sign which could help us explain what had happened to Leanne.
It wasn't long before everyone in the community heard the news.
It did make people more cautious. There was lots of different rumours going round, you know, but nobody really knew anything.
It was clear that an early forensic response would be needed, so DSI Gregg called in the Forensic Science Service, or FSS.
Well, we became involved in the Leanne Tiernan case almost from the outset, once she had gone missing. For reference purposes, if she was found or if an offender came to light, we needed to know her DNA profile and we needed to get her fingerprints. So we actually took her toothbrush and got a DNA profile from that and matched that in with profiles from her parents. And we were also able to obtain her fingerprints from her diary.
After 5 days, the search was still coming up empty-handed, despite the police's best efforts.
The scale of the search to find Leanne was huge. It was one of the biggest search operations the force had ever undertaken. It involved 200 officers, specialist search advisors. It involved the dog section, the mounted section, the underwater search teams.
Peter Grant and his forensic team did what they could under trying circumstances.
The difficulty we faced was that there was no clear scene for us to focus on. You know, there was the last sighting on the bus, and she was also intending to walk all the way home, and the scene could have been anywhere between those 2 points, which was quite a large area. Because a lot of areas were being searched, a lot of items started coming in, but they weren't ones that ended up being relevant to the case.
Getting nowhere, on the 3rd of December, 1 week after Leanne Tiernan had last been seen, the police turned to the media for help.
We staged the reconstruction and they followed the same route, right to the point where Leanne had been last seen. Now, what struck me when we were doing the reconstruction, which was how black Huffley Gill was, I was just staggered at the vulnerable position she was putting herself in when she entered that gill.
Once aired, the response was immediate.
Following the reconstruction, we were starting to piece together some interesting sightings that people were telling us about and sounds that people had heard, and 2 were of interest to us. One was a lady who said that in the weeks leading up to Leanne's disappearance, she'd seen a man, a rough-looking guy, with a dog, hanging around the entrance to Huffley Gill. And she was a little bit uneasy about this guy because he was trying to engage the children into conversation, the school children.
Straight away, the police got the witness to describe the man she'd seen, to produce an image.
Another lady remembered hearing a scream around the time that we know Leanne would have just about entered the gill. And that, again, it might have been connected, it might not, but these 2 pieces of information were important to us.
On December the 4th, police published the EFIT.
We were looking at people in that area who walked through the gill with dogs, and we questioned and found lots of them. We eliminated them all.
With the search still in full swing, officers found out everything they could about the schoolgirl they were looking for.
Leanne was a typical 16-year-old girl who was a lot to live for. She had this radiant smile. She would do anything for anybody. She looked after her grandma, went to church with her, even though she wasn't particularly keen on going to church every Sunday morning, but she did it for her grandma's sake. She'd been in the Brownies, went into the Girl Guides, and she had a group of friends, very popular girl.
Sister Janet Durbin was the minister at the Methodist chapel where the family worshipped.
Leanne did stand out because she was always bright and shiny, always helpful, and she used to like to carry the flag for the Brownies and the Guides. And as she grew older, we started a Saturday night fellowship for the teenagers, and she used to be one that asked a lot of questions. We talked about all kinds of things that were going on in the world, and she was always up with a hand up and helping. And then Leanne used to like helping in the kitchen, preparing the pizzas and chips and things. It's just a normal young girl.
After 3 weeks, there were still no useful clues, yet police kept on going.
All the time, you're racking your brains. Where is she? What can have happened to her? We've searched 1,100 houses. We've searched drainage shafts, wells, railway lines, canal. We even lowered the canal, almost pulled the plug out and drained it down because it was easier and quicker to search it that way over 3 miles. And we still hadn't found her.
Over the next few months, police continued searching and questioning people of interest. But it was as if Leanne had disappeared into thin air.
The feeling and the belief that they will still be found safe and well never goes away. And I'm sure that is the case with anybody who's facing that particular situation of a young loved one particularly who's disappeared, that they'll be found ultimately. And personally and professionally, you know that the chances of being found safe and well are slim.
By July, Operation Conifer was in its 8th month, and although the physical searching had all but ended, the police hadn't stopped looking.
The network across the UK was fairly extensive that Leanne was missing, and we were getting calls periodically that a body had been found, and we were checking out. We got Leanne's DNA, so we could quickly eliminate anyone who had been found during that intervening period while she was missing.
On August 20th, 2001, almost 9 months after Leanne's disappearance, DSI Greg received some news that changed the investigation completely. Almost 9 months had gone by without a single clue as to where missing 16-year-old schoolgirl Leanne Tiernan from Bramley in Yorkshire had gone. The longer Leanne remained missing, the more the police suspected the worst. Then police got a call that was to change everything.
A dog walker was in the woods and saw what he thought was a bundle of rubbish that somebody had dumped. And he went over to the bundle and realised that it wasn't rubbish, there was something which he thought was a dead animal in the bags. And he gingerly opened the duvet cover and saw that there was some plastic sacks tied with twine at the top. And he broke into one of the bags and realised this wasn't a dead animal, it was a dead person.
Over the months, police had found dozens of bodies around the country that hadn't been Leanne.
But this one immediately felt different. It wasn't far from where Leanne had been last seen, only 16 miles. The body had been left in a shallow grave, and this just had all the hallmarks of somebody trying to dispose of a body quickly.
Immediately, the scene was meticulously searched.
So when our forensic team started uncovering this, it was found that the girl's body had been encased in 10 plastic bags and had been encased top and tail. So the first bag had been used to put the girl's body in, tied at the top with twine, and then a bag put the opposite direction, tied with twine. And the final bag had been secured around the girl's neck with an 18-inch leather dog collar with a buckle. That parcel had then been put into the duvet cover, and the duvet cover had been used to carry that parcel into the woods. Capturing evidence from this point onwards was going to be crucial for what seemed as though a major crime had been committed.
The decision was made to then retrieve that package intact and take it back to the pathology where it could be thoroughly examined and forensic samples taken, hopefully.
Having examined the crime scene, a profile of the perpetrator began to emerge.
I think the state of the body, particularly the use of ties and the later wrapping and marks of injury, did suggest that the perpetrator had approached this in a coldly efficient, ruthless kind of way.
The packaged body of the unknown girl was taken to the nearest mortuary at Harrogate. DSI Gregg followed soon after.
Living and breathing a case like this for months, I knew this girl. I knew everything about this girl. And the worst possible outcome was that she was now on this table in front of me. And I knew it was her from the moment I looked at her. And I've never had a feeling like it before or since. And there was just something at that moment in time that was so powerful, an emotion, that it was a real inner feeling, we've got to solve this for this young kid here.
Once the bags were opened, evidence was found that would prove key in identifying the killer.
When we found her, she had got her hands tied behind her back with 3 cable ties. And there were 2 black cable ties and a yellow one. The black one was around one wrist, the yellow one around her other wrist, and they were connected between the 2 with another black cable tie, like a daisy chain, in effect, and her hands tied behind her back. She'd been strangled with 2 ligatures. One was a dark woolen scarf with a red stripe running through it, and the other was a clear-coloured cable tie that was around her neck and pulled very tightly.
The pathologist was joined by one of Peter Grant's team.
It was very important that we had a forensic scientist at the scene, and she'd actually identified a tuft of fibre on the back of the jumper.
Although DSI Gregg felt certain the body was that of Leanne, a formal identification had to occur.
We already had her fingerprints that we'd taken from her diary, and we were actually able to compare those with the fingerprints on the diary and get a formal identification that this was Leanne Tiernan.
After months of hoping and praying for Leanne's safe return, it was time to tell the family.
The news that they'd been dreading and fearing for 9 months was now suddenly upon them. And I've nothing but admiration for the stoicism, the absolute dignity that Mum and Dad showed at that moment in time.
DSI Gregg was more determined than ever to hunt down Leanne's killer. Back at the mortuary, Peter Grant's team called in an expert in insects, known as an entomologist.
Within the forensic world, we use entomologists to assist with time of death. When someone dies and they're left outside, there is a clearly defined pattern of insects being attracted to the body, and they'll lay their eggs on the body. And the state at which those insects are present can give an indication of how long the body has been dead.
The entomologist quickly made a pivotal discovery.
He was identifying insects that wouldn't normally turn up until a few weeks after a body has started decomposing. They tend to turn up. You know, certain insects come first, then others, then others. He was getting some of the later insects. You know, maybe this body had been frozen, in that when you have a frozen piece of food and you defrost it, it tends to go off quicker. And there's a similar process happening here.
Investigators believe Leanne could only have been buried where she was found for 1 week, meaning she'd been kept somewhere else the rest of the time. The big question was, where?
This was as sinister as it gets. A young girl clearly been kidnapped. Where, we still believed was in that Hopefully Gill area. But had been kidnapped, taken somewhere. Was it in the area she was now disposed of, or was it nearer to Bramley? These were all investigative considerations which we were still to find the answer to. For us as the investigation team, there were some really good forensic opportunities here, and we weren't going to let those opportunities go.
Leanne had been missing for more than 6 months, but the police never gave up trying to find her. And then when her body was discovered after 9 months, the missing persons case turned into the hunt for her depraved killer, who police and the Forensic Science Service team were determined to bring to justice.
With the suggestion that Leanne had been frozen or stored somewhere, it became important to, we wanted to know where that was, and I'd established on previous cases that one way of doing this was to look at nasal washings from bodies, because this gives you an idea of where people took their last breath, in effect.
Immediately, pollen expert Dr. Patricia Wiltshire was contacted.
I was called in to get pollen from her to see if I could envisage the sort of place that she had been. Now, we know she'd been buried in this woodland, but had she been anywhere else? Had she been kept anywhere else before she'd been put in the woodland?
Palynology, or the study of plant pollen and spores, was a tool police used quite often.
You've got pollen and spores in the environment, in a sort of mixture. And if someone goes along and picks them up, they will have certain mixtures of pollen, different amounts of different types of pollen, different types of spores on them. And then I know where these plants live and function, so I can envisage a sort of place they've come from. And if I do that, it helps the police find places.
Dr. Wiltshire went to the mortuary in Harrogate.
I irrigated her nasal passages because sometimes people breathe in pollen very deeply up into the nasal passages, right up into the top of the nose. So I irrigated those out, and I also washed her hair very carefully. And from those washings, I was able to get assemblages of pollen grains and spores that her hair had picked up. Later, I worked on the duvet cover, and what I found on the duvet cover matched up with what I found in the ant's hair. And I had pollen, plant spores, I got fungal spores. I also got the conducting elements in wood, of conifers and of flowering trees, woody plants. And they were charred. There was a lot of microscopic charred material. And I assumed, therefore, that she'd been in contact with something that had been burnt. It seemed like a bonfire because there was hardwood and softwood.
Armed with this information, Dr. Wiltshire began envisioning the sort of place Leanne had been to pick up these materials.
I said to the police that I thought it was a very neglected and downtrodden garden, that it had a bonfire in it. And I was also able to say that there was a privet hedge. There was probably either a plum or a damson tree close by. And also the ground area was very, very neglected, with brambles and all sorts of plants that are weeds, really.
With Dr. Wiltshire's incredible insight, police just needed to find a suspect with a garden that matched. Unfortunately, not all the forensics was going their way.
Leanne's body, with the decomposition, had completely obliterated the potential for DNA and fingerprints on the items that she was encased in. But there were other opportunities that we considered really, really significant.
One of these was the duvet.
Unfortunately, although we did find some body fluids on this duvet, we weren't able to get any sort of DNA result, which was a major disappointment, I think down partly to the condition of the body. Then we had to fall back on some other types of evidence from the duvet, and we noticed on there that there are a lot of animal hairs that look like dog hairs, all of a relatively similar colour and appearance, suggesting it all come from one dog.
The lack of DNA was a major concern.
We realised we had to fall back on some more traditional forensic methods and maybe build up a forensic picture that we could then use as an intelligence tool to identify an offender.
Detective Superintendent Gregg and his team went back to basics, hoping that something would point them in the direction of Leanne's killer.
The physical items which she was bound with, the cable ties, who'd manufactured them? Where were they being distributed or sold these? Who had possession of them and for what purpose? There was a yellow one, 2 black ones, and the one that had been used as a ligature, the neutral coloured ones. What's the provenance of these? We don't know until we start drilling down and finding out.
While the police got on with discovering where the cable ties and dog collar came from, Peter Grant and his team continued putting together their forensic picture.
We built up a jigsaw, if you like, of different pieces of forensic evidence. We had the twine, we had fibres, we had dog hair.
The items themselves mean nothing. It's only when you start finding out the backstory to the items that suddenly they become relevant. The fibre that was found on Leanne's back, we found out that that was a carpet fibre. And we got experts in Bradford, which is in the textile heart of the North, to help us with this. And they gave us the type of carpet that had very likely come from.
All of this forensic evidence needed a suspect to be of use. Then the dog hair on the duvet grabbed the team's attention.
From the dog hair point of view, although we could tell it was dog hair, we did notice that some of these hairs had quite decent roots, that if it was a human hair, we'd think, well, we could DNA test that.
The problem was no one had ever DNA tested dog hair in the UK. Then Peter Grant made an interesting discovery.
I found out that at that time there was a university in America that had actually established a method to carry out DNA testing on dog hair, so that was our next port of call, with a view to potentially doing some sort of dog mass screen DNA.
If it came off, it could be the break police needed. And that wasn't all. Information about the cable ties used to bound and strangle Leanne had been unearthed.
We found out where they were all manufactured, and 3 of them seemingly took us nowhere. But one of them, we thought this could be interesting. It was the yellow cable tie, manufactured by a UK company, and millions made. And so you think, seemingly, this is going to take us nowhere. But what was interesting about this, as opposed to the others, was that 90% of these were used by the Royal Mail. Could this be somebody who's got connections with the Royal Mail? Maybe, maybe not.
The twine used to tie up the plastic bags also had a story to tell.
It was a unique twine that had been put together from a forensic perspective, was absolutely terrific. You know, because you knew that if you could find more of that twine, you were going to match it up.
The team's momentum continued.
The leather dog collar around her neck. We looked at this dog collar, manufactured in Nottingham. And it was a dog collar that many millions were sold worldwide. So we knew it was a long shot, and we worked out there were X number of pet shops in Leeds that sold these dog collars. We went to every pet shop. We asked them the question, we got nowhere.
While DSI Gregg's team chased long shots, Peter Grant had gone to America with the dog hair to extract its DNA.
After a couple of days working with them, we were actually able to identify that they had a reasonable method and that this was worth a go, and we carried out the test on 2 of our dog hairs, and we did obtain a decent dog DNA profile.
Now police could organise the UK's first mass dog screening in the hope of identifying Leanne's killer. Unaware of this result, police in West Yorkshire were looking at the 120 dog collar wholesalers in the UK.
113 were checked, and the detective got the answer back each time saying, no, no, no. Pet shop, pet shop, pet shop. We supplied her. Company 114, based in Liverpool, gave an answer that the detective wasn't expecting, which was, yes, we do sell those dog collars, and yes, we do have a customer, a private customer in Leeds, who bought one. In fact, bought 6 and paid for it on a credit card.
This was the moment DSI Greg and his team had been praying for.
And have you got the name of that customer? Yes. It's a Mr. J. Taylor at Armley, Leeds. Thank you very much.
With that, 10 months after her disappearance, the investigation into the sickening murder of Leanne Tiernan finally had a suspect. The investigation into what was now the brutal murder of 16-year-old schoolgirl Leanne Tiernan from Bramley in Yorkshire finally had the breakthrough police had been looking for. The dog collar found around Leanne's neck had led police to a John Taylor from Leeds.
We found out he worked for a company called Parcel Force, which is part of the Royal Mail. He was living at home on his own in the adjoining township of Armley, which is adjacent to Bramley. He'd been divorced for 4 years, had some children, but they didn't live with him. He'd never been in trouble with the police. People knew him as John the Pet Man. He seemingly kept himself to himself, but we quickly found out that he had a bit of a nocturnal life as a poacher, liked to go out poaching.
The connection between the dog collar and ready access to Royal Mail cable ties was too much to ignore. On the 16th of October 2001, almost 10 months after Leanne's disappearance, police made their move and arrested John Taylor.
Of course, he denied any connection with Leanne, not having done anything wrong, and was denying that he'd had certain pets or animals because we were interested in pets that he'd had with our animal DNA that we were also trying to link.
News of the arrest soon travelled around the area.
It was a real shock because, you know, he was a neighbour. You know, you said hello to him. He used to sell pet food, and my kids used to go over to his house to buy pet food for the rabbits. And it was just a real shock.
John Taylor was taken for questioning, and the Forensic Science Services team methodically searched his house.
The immediate thing that struck us was that there were no carpets in the house. It's just bare floorboards everywhere. But it did appear that, certainly in some rooms, that he'd only recently taken up the carpets. And we actually identified that some of the tufts of carpet still clinging onto nails in the corners of rooms were actually the same red fibres we'd found adhering to Leanne's jumper.
The evidence police needed kept on coming.
The black cable tie that had been used to bind Leanne's hands, we found some broken ones on the fence in the garden outside, exactly the same manufacture and code. We found 2 more dog collars in the house that was still there, that matched the same dog collar that had led us to John Taylor's door in the first place.
Also during the search, there was some rabbit netting found. John Taylor was quite into trapping animals. And the makeup of the twine used to make this rabbit netting was exactly the same as the twine that had been used to tie the green bags.
So all the critical items that to him were so insignificant, suddenly were now coming back to haunt him.
With all this damning evidence mounting up, the forensic team called in Dr. Wiltshire.
I travelled up to Yorkshire, went into the garden, and it was amazing. The garden was so much like I'd envisaged. I just couldn't believe it. But there were two bonfires. There were the remains of two bonfires. But the elements that I found in Leanne's hair and on the duvet were on the left-hand side of the garden. Also, to approach that area, you had to go under a sort of archway, and there was a big, it was either a plum or a damson. There were no flowers on it, no fruits, but I knew it was a plum or a damson. And of course I'd found that pollen. I'd found the plum and damson pollen. I'd found all these plants that were in the hedge and around, and all these weeds on the ground. I'd found the remnants of a bonfire in a hair, and I could say, it's on the left-hand side of the garden, not the right-hand side. And it just all came to life for me at that minute.
Dr. Wilshire's accuracy was astonishing. At the police station, Taylor continued to be interviewed.
Faced with this overwhelming evidence, which we now had against him, he said he admitted he'd killed her, but tried to claim it was an accident.
John Taylor then gave his version of events.
He had gone to Huffley Gill that Sunday afternoon with his dog to take the dog for a walk when he saw a young girl walking down the path. He grabbed the girl, told her not to scream. He had a scarf which he tied around her eyes as a blindfold, took his coat off and put it on the girl and pulled the hood up.
Incredibly, at approximately 5 p.m. on Sunday, the 26th of November, John Taylor then walked a terrified Leanne Tiernan the 22 minutes back to his house through an estate and even over a busy road.
She was now in the clutches of this predator.
Once at his house, he took her upstairs and tied her hands with cable ties.
She kicked out at him, and he grabbed her, and he says she fell on the floor and banged her head, and there was blood all over the place. And that's how she died.
It was a story that contradicted the evidence.
Now, he had a problem explaining how Leanne hadn't died from a head injury. She'd died from strangulation. The cable tie that was used to kill her had been pulled to such an extent, so tight it was only 10 centimetres in diameter. He hadn't killed her by accident. He'd strangled her.
John Taylor was doing his best to avoid a murder charge, but DSI Gregg wasn't about to let that happen.
We put an identity parade together, and the lady who'd seen the man with the dog hanging around, talking to children, who she was uneasy about, picked him out.
The identification was a persuasive argument for the police's case that this had been a well-planned crime. But there was one crucial bit of evidence missing.
One of the more grim aspects of the scene was that a dog was buried in the garden. And this was a dog that had essentially been hit over the head with a shovel, it appeared. And unfortunately, the dog was in such, again, advanced state of decay that it wasn't suitable for us to DNA test, so we just decided not to pursue that line in the end.
It was a blow that, despite all the effort, the dog DNA was unusable. Officers carried on questioning Taylor.
He denied freezing Leanne's body, but we know it was frozen through the medical evidence. What his story was that after he'd killed her, he didn't know what to do with her body. So to start with, he took it into the back garden and put Leanne's body under a lot of pallets and tried to hide it that way until he could think what to do with her.
Police knew for certain that Leanne had been frozen. They just didn't know why.
maybe he considered it wiser to actually keep the body inside his house than to put it in the landscape that was currently undergoing a very thorough search.
Another theory was that John Taylor kept Leanne frozen as a morbid trophy he could continually revisit for his grotesque pleasure. Next, he claimed he took her to Lindley Wood just days after killing her.
We know that Leanne's body had only been in the woods for a maximum of a week, and there was a witness who saw a man a week before the body was found lifting a bundle out of the boot of a car that matched John Taylor's description, that matched the description of his car, taking it into the woods.
John Taylor was charged, and then on the 8th of July 2002, over 18 months after 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan went missing, he stood trial at Leeds Crown Court for her kidnap and murder. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, he changed his plea.
Taylor had been trying to minimise his part in Leanne's death, claiming it was an accident, an unfortunate accident. But right at the end, he knew he had to face the prosecution case.
It was a great relief to the family not having to go through a whole trial, and he was convicted.
He was described as a sadistic sexual predator by the judge, told he would never be released from prison. That changed, of course, with the new Sentencing Act, sentenced to 30 years. But that's the calibre of this individual. He's a killer, shows no remorse. Not once would he have had any compassion for this young girl in his clutches, only what he wanted to do with her.
The local community welcomed the news.
I think there was a sense of relief after it had all come to a head, that somebody had been prosecuted for this crime. But I don't think an area can ever go back to the same again, because you're always wary of other things that might happen.
I would find it hard to forgive him, although we have to forgive him. Obviously an evil man. He'd planned to get somebody, and Leanne just happened to be there. And a cruel man. All the dead animals that he'd just battered to death. I can't understand him.
After 12 months of frustration and dead ends, Leanne's killer had finally been brought to justice.
The case that was built by the whole team was one that there was no wriggle room for John Taylor whatsoever. And I think that's just testament to the professional and thorough job that everyone on this case did.
You don't often witness where killers of this propensity and cruelty are, here in front of you, being sentenced, and the words poured on them from the bench. But whilst it did bring to an end one part of the investigation into John Taylor, it wasn't the final chapter. Because in our minds there was more to tell. This couldn't be the first time that he'd done this.
As a result of Leanne's murder inquiry, police reopened at least 10 cold case investigations looking at Taylor, convinced this wasn't a one-off. And less than a year after his conviction, Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 separate rapes.